Hey guys, welcome to another episode on Andertons TV. And I have a very special guest today because I've decided that it's about time that we should invite the man that started it all to come onto the show. So look, it's Mr. Peter Anderton, my dad, who, yeah.
Nickname?
Do you want a nickname?
Admiral?
The Admiral.
The Admiral.
Yeah, absolutely. The Admirable Admiral. And yeah, thank you very much for coming on.
Oh, very nice. It's great to see you again.
Yes.
I don't see enough of you.
This is true. So, obviously, what I'd like to try and talk about, you started the store with your dad, my granddad, in the early 60s.
We did.
So we'll talk about that.
Okay.
But let's talk before. You're a drummer. Alleged drummer, as was granddad and as is Guy, my brother.
That's true.
So come on, tell us, growing up in the sort of 50s and what sparked the interest in music?
Well, that's a good question. What sparked my interest in music? Well, I suppose I was born in 46, which was just after the war. So we had rationing and all that stuff. We lived in a little flat in Battersea, on the ground floor, little garden. So I had Clapham Common, if anybody knows that area, was my playground when I was really young. So that's how things started. But my dad, as you know, Harry, was a keen drummer and had been in dance bands pretty much, all the time I knew him. He was in the police as well. We'll come to that a bit later. I'll tell you a story of how it's quite a long story, actually. How long have we got? So my interest in music. So it was always around. My dad, he just loved. He lived for his dance band and going out. But he was he always had a dicky bow, like a black dinner suit. So that's how I always remember him getting ready to go out on his jobs on a Saturday night. And of course, it was very growing up. It was a bit surreptitious because police are not supposed to have a second job or an income.
Right.
And I always remember listening to conversations, where he'd be doing a Masonic Lodge do or something like that in the West End of London, because most of his gigs were in the West End of London, Cafe Royal and Dorchester Hotel and all those sorts of things, and he'd be terrified there'd be one of his senior officers, in the lodge or something like that. So I always remember that. But he always had that great interest in music, and he was very he was a big. I was thinking about this last night, when we were chatting after the Halloween thing. But he had a much more of an influence on my life than I probably realise, in terms of his artistic ability. He's a very great artist, and was fantastically clever with his hands. Like he could make anything. And in fact, that sort of war generation, if they could make, my dad would always, he would prefer to make it rather than buy it.
We used to get some great toys as kids. I remember Grandad made me a castle, like I guess a modern day equivalent would be like a Lego type castle, but he made the whole thing out of wood and had little figures and I had that for years.
Yeah,
but
I know, yeah.
I don't think nowadays you just buy it, wouldn't you, from Amazon? Yeah. But he must have spent weeks.
But it was the ingenuity that fascinated me, because he did the same for me at some point when we'd moved. So I would be about 7 or 8, something like that. Big fort, like about 3 foot square. And he'd come up with a way of creating a drawbridge and a portcullis out of cotton reels, elastic bands and wax candles. I always remember this. So you pulled the drawbridge down like that and let it go, and it used to go like this. Oh. And the portcullis came down at the same time. And you looked inside, and it was all just done with elastic bands, cotton reels, and the cotton reels on the wax candles, And it wasn't until years later I thought, he was really bloody clever at that, and it made Leslie, my sister, an amazing doll's house, with all just in our little shed. Well, I'll come on to that a bit later. This is when we'd moved to Fulham. So what happened then? So we didn't have much to do with music, I suppose, apart from it being around, up to the age of about 7. And then when I was 7, we moved to Fulham. Into police accommodation. So we moved to this place called Walham Grove, which was ever so posh now. You can't buy a house, under about a few million there. But in those days, we just, because we didn't own property, my dad was, by that time, was in the CID. He was, he used to study a lot at home. I remember him doing his exams, and he got to detective sergeant. and he was still keen on his drumming, you know, and that's the thing. So I'd be about 7 then when we moved there, and so as I got a bit older, I started getting interested in, because drums and drumming and music was all around. I started bashing on a practice pad, you know, about the age of about 11 or 12 or something like that. But at that time, of course, my dad was a jazz fan, you know. He was brought up on jazz and you know, Count Basie, big band stuff, Buddy Rich. We went to see Buddy Rich at the Cafe Royal live, you know, when he was over in the UK. That was a great evening, yeah. And so big band, Count Basie, Duke Ellington, all that sort of stuff. But I didn't get hooked on, I didn't get inspired by that, you know. But and again, I was trying to reflect last night on what my earliest influences would have been somebody like Lonnie Donegan, because Lonnie, you know, at that time, whilst we're talking about 56, 57, 1956, 1957, Lonnie Donegan was a huge, massive influence on loads of later rock musicians. You know, you quite often hear sort of rock musicians, guitarists my age now, who say, you know, their first inspiration was seeing Lonnie Donegan live, you know, sort of. And he had a rather strange genre, didn't he, of skiffle.
Skiffle, wasn't it? Yeah.
Where it was a rock country, but, you know, up tempo. So of course we had a little skiffle band. I must have been, and we had some guy we had the proper T-chest double bass, you know, down in the basement of the flats where we used to live. Somebody had a guitar, and I had a washboard for starters, because you had a washboard in those days, you know. And then I graduated to a pair of bongos on a stand, you know. So I thought that was pretty cool, you know. So I used to do that. And then I got to about where was it? I was then moved school. I went on to secondary school at Putney, and I'd be about 12 years old, I suppose. There wasn't I? About 12. And got more and more interested, and then met up with a few guys at school that played, you know, Pete Green being one of them. So we were in the same class in the second and third year together. So
I should just say, we're talking the Peter Green, not just a Pete Green. But yes, so this was Dad's first band. Not a bad guitar player to have in there.
No, it was great. And his brother, but Pete and, because I'm just talking to a guy that's doing a biography of Pete Green. Christopher, what's his surname? I can't think, Danish guy, but he did one on Jeff Beck.
Right.
So he's writing this book. But I remember Pete's brother as well, Mickey Green, who was his older brother, who was probably an influence on him, and they lived on Putney Hill. But he was just an amazing player even in those days, you know. So I can't remember any of the other guys in the band. But anyway, so there was quite a bit of activity. But the influences on music were very much listening to Radio Luxembourg, you know, it was Radio Luxembourg, and that's about all I can remember. I can't remember buying many records in those days because I didn't have any money for a start, you know, like pretty skint. But I was always a bit entrepreneurial, you know. So I started out getting a couple of paper rounds. I did a morning paper round. I did a Sunday paper round. To earn some pin money, and then started working on a stall in North End Road Market, you know, sort of like flogging.
Selling what? Yeah.
Well, it was like a general grocery stall, you know, like cream crackers, and I had to learn how to shout out, you know, £1 of butter, packet and shake of cream crackers, 2 and 6, or something like that, you know. I was only 12 or 13. So, but it was a good experience, you know, like gives you a bit of confidence and things like that, and because I think I was very insecure, you know, as a kid, really. But so that gave me a bit of confidence. So I earned a few bob and things like that. So used to listen to Radio Luxembourg. Where would I go to? And those were the influences. Was that late, mid to late 50s, you know, rock, you know, rock and roll, and it was so
the big American scene. What, Buddy Holly, Elvis, all that kind of stuff. Yeah, Buddy
Holly. But there was quite a bit going on in the English side as well. You know, it was like Marty Wilde, Adam Faith. There was. Who was the other producer who did Telstar? I'll remember it. This is my problem now, see, like getting dementia setting in, I think. But it'll come to me in a minute. But there were some fantastic producers around in those days, British producers, that did stuff and had, you know, a stable of rock artists, you know. And there was the Two Eyes Coffee Bar and all that sort of stuff. So but Dad wasn't very keen. You know, Harry wasn't that keen. He was trying to push me into the jazz sort of stuff all the time, and because I wanted to play straight eights, you know, and you go no, you go, you know, like get the brushes out, mate. And, you know, I'll teach you how to do a roll, you know, like because he did do a fantastic press roll, Harry, didn't he? He used to impress people with that in the shop, like a Scottish military tattoo drummer, you know. I'll always remember his press roll. So there was a bit of antipathy there, and he didn't have a lot of patience to sort of like. He just you know, bloody racket, you know, rubbish music sort of thing. But I did eventually. I practiced, you know, with a rubber pad, you know, for I don't know, a year or two, and then I think I used to borrow his kit, or I can't remember the first kit I got. But I got a kit, and the problem was I couldn't drive because I was only 15, I suppose. I started probably 14, 15. So my dad had to run me, you know, like dads are always the taxi drivers, aren't they? So he had to run me up to the school with all the gear and then pick me up again. In fact, this was about, I don't know, half-hour drive away from Fulham. And then I just did a few things like that. But then I got a gig in a pub. I don't know how I got it.
This is the first ever gig, is it?
Well, probably. I was doing stuff around that time, but there was a great piano player at school, and I struggle to remember his name. He did become quite famous. I saw him, you know, playing keyboards in one or two bands later, and I thought, I recognise that guy. Anyway, and he was just a natural piano player. And we ended up, whether my dad had a lot of contacts, you see, in the music industry in the West End, and because quite often he needed a dep, you know, like it was like there was always a dep situation going on. Deputising, it was a slang word, I suppose, for a deputising musician. So they were always going, I need a dep for this gig, I need a dep for this. He had lots of contacts in Denmark Street as well, you know. And he got us this gig, piano and drums, right, in Cable Street, I think it was. It was either Commercial Road or Cable Street in the East End of London, you know, right, heavy area, you know. And I think I was about 13, 14, you know, playing in a pub with this guy. I wish I could remember his name. Fabulous piano player. Anyway, so that was, you know, that's how I started. And I used to play 3 or 4 nights a week there, and over the weekend. So Dad would run me there with the kit, leave the kit there. I'd go back on the tube, you know, to Fulham, and go backwards and forwards. And then occasionally, if Dad couldn't run me, I had to get the kit back on the train, on the tube. You know, can you imagine? So,
and this was a paid gig, was it? As well? So I was earning a bit of cash even at that age.
I mean, in those days, actually, musicians did manage to earn. You know, I think we got £2 or something like that. You know, but it was a paid gig, and that was fun. But interesting. But then I got into a couple of good rock bands. Nothing. I don't think these guys were at school with me. I don't know how. I can't remember how I met them. But a big tall guy, Graham, who was a great player, and we used to get lots of gigs in and around Putney and Hammersmith. You know, like Half Moon in Putney, places like that.
I played there.
Yeah. Well, you know,
you played there. It's a great
But this
pub.
is back in, you know, in the 50s, I suppose, isn't it? 50s. Late 50s, Half Moon Pub, and lots of different, you know, places in and around southwest London mainly, anyway. And I would practice listening to stuff, you know, and being influenced by the drummers of those days. But I don't know when the Shadows come along, 58, 59. So Tony Meehan was the first Shadows drummer. You know, and he was pretty good. So, of course, that's what we were all copying.
Yeah.
We were copying the Shadow stuff, covering that, and all the influences coming over from America. The Tornado, it was Tornado, and the Tornadoes, rather. But loads of stuff, like Eddie Cochran, and that lovely, you know, that sort of backbeat type of stuff. And blue. It wasn't so much. I didn't get into the blues stuff until a little bit later. You know, they started to get into the Chuck Berrys and the B.B. Kings and those early influences. So where do we get to? So then I'm making quite a good living.
Yeah.
Mixing between, well, I say good living, but like I was still at school. Still at school, but that's what happened. I wasted my education. I actually chucked it's the biggest regret to date, that I was a top boy in the first 2 years in my school. I was getting fantastic results, and then I thought, a bloody ego like this. Don't need to do any more of this work. I can just go in the art department where I used to spend most of my time and play music. And then I started bunking off.
So that's where I got it all from.
Yeah. So I used to bunk off for weeks at a time and go down the snooker hall in Putney High Street, with a mate of mine. And then we had to come up with excuses for why we'd been absent for like 3 or 4 weeks, and because as every day went by, and you went, I was like, I better stay off a bit longer, So of course Dad didn't know, Harry didn't know, and so you get terrified,
I bet he went ballistic, didn't he?
Well, I don't think he ever found out until I told him when I left.
What sort of policeman was he?
After I left school, So I wasted my education academic, and I finally came out of school. I was the oldest member of the upper six, I think. I was about 17 and a half or 18 and I was still at school. And they said, Mr. Henderson got called into the headmaster's office, said, we can see you've managed to get O-level art, which was it. And but she said, you should have left school about 6 months ago. But how come you're still here? So I said, I used to get on really well with the art department teacher, and we were always doing projects for the school. Anyway. So I'm playing and having a good time, enjoying life.
At this point, are you thinking, I'm going to be a professional drummer? That's what my life career choice is going to be.
No. I suppose I need to backtrack as well, because at the same time, but I just backtrack here because the key, the starter for the music shop and everything else really was when I met Harry Webber.
Yeah.
Harry Webber.
So this is not obviously Harry Anderton.
No, it's not Harry Webber. This is
the granddad.
This is
Harry Webber's someone else.
A guy called Harry Webber, who was an absolute character, who ran this music shop in King Street, Hammersmith, called King Street Music Stores. He's long dead now, so is my dad. So I can talk about this, I suppose. There's no chance of him getting nicked, or him getting thrown out for corruption or whatever. But so I think I would have been about 13 or 14, and Harry Webber ran this. You've got to imagine this is...
Is he same sort of age as Grandad?
No, he must have been a little bit younger, but he was just a character. He had virtually no teeth, and he had one brown stained tooth up here like a canine, which he called his pickled onion stabber. So he always used to wear a brown coat, like Ronnie Barker in
like a tradesman's kind of
open
brown.
All hours. Yeah, that was it. They all seemed to. So he wore this brown coat, and he was just funny. He was just so hilarious. He was a real character. And this music shop was an oldie worldy. When I say oldie worldy, it was a fairly typical music shop from the 40s and 50s. We sold everything. So violins. They had a good business in violins, cellos, brass instruments, woodwind, lots and lots of customers, like guys. It was like a little specialist shop, really. Him and his dear wife, Teresa, who was a little old Irish lady who spoke like this. She was terribly timid, ever so timid. And Harry used to have a dicky heart, so she used to come out. When I was there, sort of more full time, she'd come out and, Harry, it's time for your sleep, come on. And she'd go and get him, and so he had to go and have a lay down. And then if people came into the shop, she didn't know what the hell anything was, I tell you, it's just, I can't believe it, looking back on it. So how I came to work there was he didn't do drums, and he was thinking about doing drums because drums were just sort of becoming quite popular, And that this was the start, I suppose, of the beginning rumblings of the beat boom. It was called the beat boom in those days, when you know, every kid on the block wanted a guitar or wanted to be a guitarist or a drummer.
Yeah.
You know, once they realised they could pull, you know, so we got three chords and a guitar, they could
Some
pull.
things never change.
No, some things never change. So my dad at that time was stationed. He'd had quite an interesting career in the CID because he was on the flying squad for quite a while, worked out of West End Central. And this is, I don't know if you've watched Life on Mars, have you?
Yeah.
In the 70s. Well, if you can imagine it, probably twice as bad as that, because this is the late 50s, early 60s, you know, like in the 50s. That's what it was like, you know, and he would never talk about it.
So, I mean, flying squad for anyone, that's
the flying
drugs.
squad is flying squad was a branch of CID running out from Scotland Yard, I think. They're still
But they were on the serious crime.
Serious crime, yeah, and you know, sort of. I don't know. You know, he very rarely would he ever talk about it. You know, so but
that was who would have all the run-in with the sort of mobsters kind of vibe.
He was dealing with when the Krays were around. So the corruption, I would imagine, was horrendous. You know.
Yes.
But anyway, so he did a spell there. But he did tell me some funny stories. I'll tell you one. You've probably never heard this before, but he used to laugh about it, and the only times I could get him chatting about it, you know, was when he found it really funny. And that what they would do, they would raid somewhere that they'd get a tip off that somebody had a load of porn, because porn books in those days, you know, were illegal, right? So they would raid this place. They'd take all the porn books away, you know, and then they'd go around the corner and flog them to someone else. And that's how they, you know, so they made all their pin money, you know. I mean, it goes on. It used to go. It probably still does, you know. But anyway, so lots of stories like that I used to hear. You know. Allegedly, yeah. Allegedly. And he was funny. Harry was. He was a real comedian. You know, very quick-witted. A bit like you. I'm sure that's where you get it from. It bypassed me, I'm afraid, the wit. But he was, and being a West Ham fan bypassed me as well. But my dad was a keen West Ham fan, as you know, Lee is. So it obviously skipped a generation. But so Dad ended up at Hammersmith Police Station. He did a spell at Notting Hill. I don't know if any people again my age might remember in London the Notting Hill riots. It was a horrendous, you know. Right. And he was based at Notting Hill during that time, Notting Hill riots. So, you know, he must have seen a lot of the shit side of life, you know, that sort of thing. And he was quite a sensitive man, I think, in terms of being like an artist and musician and that sort of thing. So I think he used to try and shut that side off, and he would never talk about it at home. But anyway, he used to know Harry Webber. He got to know Harry Webber in the King Street music stores in Hammersmith, because Harry Webber used to like to dabble in a bit of bent gear. You've heard this story before.
I don't think I have, but I'm loving it.
I'm sure how. I think I told this at our 40th anniversary, didn't I? Harry could not. He'd got criminal record. Right. He'd done some time in Nick. I don't know when, but he'd done some time in Nick, so he had a criminal record for receiving. Yeah. But he couldn't keep his hands off a bit of bent merchandise.
The profit margins are very high on that.
Very high, yeah, very high, very, very
Allegedly.
high. And so it was in his interest to befriend my dad. Yeah, you know, and so they got quite pally. And you know, if there was any imminent danger of a couple walking in and I don't know trying to nick Harry, he'd be on the phone to my dad Harry and go, Harry, so he'd sort of like, I don't know, smooth things over, whatever they did, I don't know, and might bung him a few cymbals and things like that, or give him, he got a good bit of discount. So Harry's saying that he was looking for a new Saturday boy. So there was the Saturday boy he had before me, there was a photograph of him in that old archive, right? With Harry Webber. So that might be interesting to dig that out. So I can't remember his name, but there's Harry and this other guy who I replaced. So, or he replaced me, one of the two. Anyway, but there's a photograph of King Street music stores. It'd be interesting to have a quick look. And he was funny because down the road was another guy, a Jewish guy who ran another music shop. We used to call this the shiny shop, you know, like he'd send people up there. He used to sort of, if he didn't like these youngsters coming in and that sort of wanting rock and roll guitars, he'd go, no, go up the shiny shop, mate. You know, used to call it the shiny shop. I'm trying to think of the governor's name there. But anyway,
it wasn't Ivor Arbiter, was it?
No. This was Ivor.
No.
Ivor was around then, but I'll come to that in a minute. So I'm about 13, I suppose. Must be about 13, 14. And so I get this job in Harry Webber's music shop, you know. And because I'm a drummer, he wanted somebody, you know, that could talk drums to the customers, you know. And we used to get a lot of bands in there and that sort of thing. You know, a little bit later on, over the next 2 or 3 years, like the Who were regular customers. I mean, they weren't big names, and they were just breaking, you know.
Yeah.
But they would come in. Another guy I remember who was a fairly regular customer was Tommy Cooper, you know.
Right.
Tommy Cooper, big bloke, used to come in, and he was really serious, you know. But he used to come in for kazoos and Jaws harps, they were called. You know, those things.
Yeah.
So he used to come in for his bits and pieces, you know, like, and it wasn't as if years later you think, oh dear, the number of people we used to, you know, see. You know. So I started there as a Saturday boy, and I really loved it. You know, it was great. So I'm doing drums and things like that, and then I do Saturdays, you know, every day. And then Harry says, you know, well, could you work during the school holidays, you know, things like that. So I said, yeah, okay. So I ended up going in pretty much every day during school holidays. And Saturdays for a year or two, something like that. But I was interested as well in all the repair work. So I started doing drum recovering. That was one of the first things we did. In Fulham, we had these flats. We had a little garden outside in the back. There were 3 flats, I think. So each flat had a little bit of a square of garden. And my dad built a little shed in there, right? Okay, freezing cold it was in the winter, but you know, a little shed. And my dad showed me, first of all, how to recover drums, because that's what, you know, he was really handy. And we used to go to Romford, to buy this stuff called Nacrolac. Can you imagine?
And that was like the plastic covering
it was like
that would go on there.
The plastic covering, yeah, but we couldn't get hold of the sort of like the glitter stuff, like it was on the American drums, like Ludwig and that sort of thing. So, but we ended up finding this company that made this stuff called Nacrolac for sort of spectacle frames. And that.
Right.
So used to go out and buy a roll of this. And anyway, it's various methods and practice recovering drums. So I used to offer a recovering service, right? So I started that. And then Harry, I was interested in we did a lot of repairs there. So we did repairs to brass and woodwind, violins, cellos, mainly saxophones, flutes, clarinets. They always needed new pads, springs, overhauling. And we had a couple of guys that we used to put that work out to. But I got Harry to show me. I was really interested. You know, show I can do that. You know, I can put new pads in that clarinet and respring it, and mouthpieces, and you know, all sorts of bits and pieces like that. So I said, I'll do that. So he would pay me a bit extra to do that sort of stuff. So I'd take it home in the shed, and do repair. I taught myself guitar there. That was when that one and only piece I can play.
Yeah. Your little flamenco piece that you play.
Like a piece of classical with I can't remember what it's called, but a little classical piece. And I practiced this piece in the shop, you know, because it was very quiet there a lot of the time. You'd go an hour or 2 hours without seeing a customer. Yeah. So I'd just sit behind the till, you know, play. You know, I got pretty good at that, but that was all I could play. It was enough anyway. So, and I tried to teach myself a scale. I would play a scale on a flute or clarinet or saxophone, you know, just so I could test them and test to see if they were working okay. And so did a bit of that. And then I started, the bit that I made the most money out of was bow rehairing, right? Violin and cello bow rehairing.
Wow.
Which is... I know, it's
who knew?
Who knew? It's just amazing. But
where'd you get the hair from?
Well, it's back then it was
it's horsehair.
I go to Barnes and Mullins or Stentors.
You didn't literally you didn't run up behind a horse and snip
No, there you go. No, you'd buy it. It was bleached hair was white, or black hair was black, you know. And then I was doing that for a while, and I loved it. It's such a skilled job, you know. Putting, you know, like if you look at a violin bow, there's all these little parts on it. There's a frog and a ferrule screw and a little bit of this and a bit of that, and you have to make these little wooden blocks and chips, and you've got to get the hair just right, the length of it just right, so that when you poke it all in the in the frog at the end, it's not like like an archery bow.
Yeah.
The hair's just the right distance off the wood so that the guy can play it. And of course, you've got a bit of adjustment on the thing, And then synthetic hair came out, which was a boon because you could just burn that with a lighter, and it would melt on the end. So with the real hair, you had to use resin. So you'd heat up a bit of little block of glue, resin, and do all that. So anyway, I had a mini factory going in the shed back home. I used to take these bundles of violin bows and cello bows back home. And after school,
I was saying, no wonder you never went to school. You had a full-time job.
Yeah, I know. Well, it was Sundays and evenings, I'd be rehairing bows and all that sort of stuff. And I did some guitar repairs, simple repairs and violin repairs, which I loved, like resetting bridges. Not, anything but people used to come in to have a bridge reset. There's a sound post inside, you have all these special tools like a sound post resetter. You sort of have to go in through the F hole.
That is a specialist tool.
Yeah, you have to go in through the F hole and set the sound post and, and the pegs and things like that, sort of putting new pegs on. And it's a really, so I've learned a lot over, a few years. I'm playing still. And then towards, I'm getting to about 16 or 17, and Harry Webber, during the school holidays, he used to he'd put me in a taxi and send me into the West End to do his buying, do some of his buying, yeah? So I used to go into the West End, and that's where all the big wholesalers were, like Selmer's, Selmer and Company, Arbiters. They were in whereabouts? They were just off of Shaftesbury Avenue, weren't they? And there was Drum City up there, and
Rose Morris.
Morris, Barnes and Money's, Rose Morris, Stentor, Boozy and Hawkes. I think had they didn't have a factory there, but they had some presence there in Tottenham Court Road, didn't they? Yeah. So there were all the big music shops that are there in Tottenham Court Road and Shaftesbury Avenue. So it was like a sweet shop jobby. So, and I used to dress Harry's windows as well. I used to do the window dressing, So I'd go up the West End and have a look and see what Drum City was doing. And I'd go, oh, that looks good, I'll go back and try and do that in King Street Music Store, like a 4-foot wide window, So it was fun though. Where did I go to? So, sort of real forward. So I got to know lots of the wholesalers and the reps. Like when I was in there during the summer holidays, the reps would come. Do you remember Marty? I was trying to remember the name. Do you remember Martin Fredman from Arbiters? Yeah. Well, Martin was one of the very first guys I got to know. And he was a really nice guy. And Alan Maxted, as you know, I was chatting to Alan the other day. He's 80 something odd. Well, he was Premier Drum Company's rep back in those days. So I knew all these guys to chat to. So, there was never any talk of a music shop though. But I get to school leaving age, don't I? And I'm sort of like thinking, oh, what am I going to do now? And I didn't really see being a professional drummer as a career. I don't think I wasn't good enough. I don't think I was. Right. I don't think I was. I don't think I was good enough to. Or maybe if I don't know. Just don't know. But it wasn't something that appealed to me. And I think Dad always put me off. He'd always say, don't. If you want to be a professional musician, be a harmonica player, because you can put it in your pocket. You can turn up to a gig and go, here, right, ready, lads. Thank you, good night, and put it away. Because the drummers, it's a nightmare. You've got to pack, you've got to set it all up. You've got to be there an hour before or whatever. Then at the end of the gig, everybody else is off. Sorry.
It's all right. You probably just heard beeped off. Yeah, it's fine.
You're the last one there, still packing. And all the best birds have gone as well because the guitarist had nicked those, or the lead singer. So you get left with the dogs hanging around. It's awful, isn't it?
It's fine.
It's very misogynistic.
This was the 1960s,
yes,
everybody.
Very
I'm
misogynistic.
Just saying.
Late 50s. It's late 50s. So I what I thought I would do would be to go to art college.
Right.
So that's really I wanted to do a diploma in art and design. DIP-AD it was called. But I looked around and I didn't have enough qualifications. I should have had some, I needed some O and A levels to do it. And Harry used to say to me, well, what are you going to do? You know, I said, I just don't know. I don't know. You don't know, do you, in those days? I go, well, so every sort of, I don't know, every day, you don't look at the future. You just every day, I think, I'll survive. I'll clean more cars. Oh, that was something I was going to mention to you. About the influences of music was when we were in Fulham, one of the other things I used to do to earn money was clean cars on a Sunday morning. So I'd do my paper round, and then I'd start cleaning all the neighbours' cars, you know, for turn 6 of wash or 5 bob. You know, I was earning quite a lot of money actually with gigs and that. I was doing all right. So I could afford some cool clothes.
Right.
So my best,
you were quite trendy.
My best buy ever were some handmade winkle pickers, black winkle picker boots with Cuban heels, with a strap over and 3 pearl buttons that actually did up.
Nice.
And they were handmade by an Italian bootmaker in Battersea. I'll remember his name. But all the mods, you know, because this is a time of being a mod at school in the teens. You know, I couldn't afford a Lambretta, but I had the Lambretta jacket. You know, so used to sort of strut around with some keys, you know, pretending I had one, and my winkle pickers, you know. But these winkle pickers were ace, you know. But Harry used to go potty when I put those on, so I used to have to hide them in my duffel bag and change in the toilets down the end of the road, you know. So when I got on the bus, I was tooled up, you know, with my kit on. So I digress, don't I? So I know. So next door to us in Walham Grove, lived a guy called Jimmy Grant.
Right.
Jimmy Grant was the producer of a BBC programme called Saturday Club.
Right.
Right. So you know, and that was the sort of Saturday Club was everybody, you know, all the kids used to tune into this. I think it was on the light programme because it didn't have Radio 1 or anything back in those days. I think it was just but it was a cool on medium wave, I suppose. It was a light programme. But Jimmy was the producer. So, and it was a programme with all new releases on, right? So I used to do his car, which was a little old Renault Dauphin or something like that, I remember, white one. And he used to say, "Come in, Pete," you know, so right. And he was a lovely guy. I mean, I saw him as quite old, but he was probably only in his mid-20s or something like that. But he used to give me piles of 45s, like mountains of them, you know, like of all the records that he'd been sent by the record companies and various people, you know, 99% of which were crap, because he used to keep all the good ones, I suppose, to play on the show. So I never got anything that was worth listening to, you know, worth keeping. But it's sort of like you could get your influences of what was going on in the music scene, you know, sort of that from that. So so sort of roll forward then to I'm about to leave school. I'm quite happy working for Harry Webber because, you know, I don't know, I might have gone full time. In fact, I think I did go full time there. So I think I left school. That's right, I did. I left school and went full time at Harry Webber's for a period. And I can't remember how long. By that time, I'd passed my driving test, got my first little mini van, you know, little old second-hand mini van, so I could get my drum kit around. So that was cool. And then I think my dad decided that he was 49 years old then, and he had to decide whether he was going to sign on. He was going to take early retirement or 25 years. He could come out at 25 years and with a good pension, index-linked pension, and or he had to sign on for another 10, I think it was, or something like that. So I think that was quite an influence. He said, I don't really want to do anything. I've had enough. I've had a gutful of the police, you know, and blah, blah, blah. And it was him, because I was working there, it was him. I said, well, how do you fancy, why don't we have a music shop then? Why do you fancy music? He said, you know the reps, you know, you can do repairs. And he said, you know, and he obviously knew everything about drums and drumming. And bless his heart, he sort of worked it out, because my mum was very supportive as well, you know, at the time, and I had 2 sisters. So we were, well, Leslie would have been 5 years younger than me, and Debbie was 10 and 11 years younger than me. So he still had a lot of responsibilities, you know. And the flat where we were was rented, was police supplied accommodation, and you had to, you know, I suppose they had a subsidised rent, but we had no capital. We didn't have any money. So he says, you know, how do you fancy doing this? And I went, okay, I'll be all right for that. So where are we gonna, you know, how are we gonna start then? So it was I look back on this, I think it's just amazing. He managed to get a loan of £700, which must have been a lot of money in those days, from an insurance broker friend of his, Freddie somebody or other. We sold once we decided we were going to do it, we sold the family car, which was a Ford Consul or something, and bought this old beat-up van from my Auntie Mildred, who'd just come over from South Africa or something, and little Ford thing, and we sold our record collections.
Oh,
I know,
heartbreaking.
and heartbreaking for my dad as well. But we this is what we had. So I can't think what drum kit I had back then. I think I managed to scrape together. I got obviously a discount from Harry Weber, but I had a Oyster Grey Rogers kit. I think was my first kit. Yeah, Oyster Pearl Rogers kit, and some Zildjian cymbals and stuff. And then I graduated onto that. At some point, a pink champagne Ludwig kit, which my son, Guy still has in Australia, and wheels out regularly.
He does.
Which you can see that drum kit still going 3 generations later. Still sounds good. So Harry, my dad, he had to, he worked it out somehow that we could do it by raising this bit of money. And I, because I knew the reps, I approached the reps for the various companies, and they were very generous. They said, yeah, we know you, appreciate you starting up. We'll give you 300 or 400 quid worth of credit. So it was all done on credit. So you could open up a credit account with them and spend a few hundred quid and get the stock. And Harry Weber was fantastic as well. He was, even I said, Harry, we're going to start up on our own, but we're not going into competition with you or anything else. And he said, oh, wonderful. And he gave us, he just actually gave us loads of stock, said, pay me when you can, I mean, I love that man. He was just a special guy. He was my second dad, really, in a way, And so we then started, but just before this, we started to say, well, okay, where are we going to open? Where are we going to get? So my dad's still in the police force at this time, don't forget. So he's still working, I'm still working, we're still drumming, both of us, in the evenings, 3 or 4 nights a week, and he had he had some good work, Dad. But I think it was the clash as well for him. He saw this as an opportunity to stop all the problems of, like, he'd have a gig in the West End or something, and the phone would go on a Saturday night. This was, I've told you this. Phone would go 5 or 6 o'clock. Harry, we've got a murder. You better get down here. Or so. And he had to drop everything, find somebody to replace him, get a dep drummer in, because there was an unwritten law. Well, there still is, I think, amongst gigging musicians, particularly on that sort of circuit. You don't let anybody down. If you take a gig, you turn up, or you make sure that you put in somebody that's equally as good. Yeah, so we start looking around for premises, I suppose, in London. So obviously because we're living in Fulham, and we know the area. Anyway, we start looking everywhere. And we go around. Dad's like skiving off from the nick, and like he can get away for a couple of hours. Anyway, we cannot find anywhere that we remotely think we could afford. That was the problem. We think, how the hell are we going to? How could we, starting off from scratch, you just got no idea. So we were getting a bit despondent, I think, by this time. And because a lot of the family had connections in and around Guildford and Godalming area, the family were posted out during the war, evacuated or things like that. And my mum came from a huge family of 11 surviving kids altogether, 2 brothers and 9 sisters. Can you imagine? So Christmases were an absolute nightmare. Used to get sort of sore, But so we knew that area. We were always going from London to Guildford and Godalming and Hazelmere. So where all the family lived, pretty much. And they were police as well. I had a couple of uncles that were in the police in Hazelmere. He was uniform head of the station there. So some good connections. And my other uncle, he rose to really senior level at Mount Brown in Guildford, Peter Jones. But he died at the age of 42, a heart attack, just dropped dead. sometime back then. But he was, quite high up. I don't know what rank he'd achieved. So we knew, so we were familiar with that area, and we were always bashing backwards and forwards in our little old Ford, whatever it was, little Ford, those old cars, backwards and forwards, weekends, like to go and see the family and things like that. Mm-hmm. So we knew this area. And I still to this day do not know why but we found this little old derelict shop, right, in Stoke Fields, it was called in those days. This derelict shop, which was a greengrocer's, and the bloke, he had one arm, apparently, this greengrocer. I come to the story. He had one arm, and with one arm, he was building a bomb-proof shelter, because that was in the days of some sort of Cold War thing, isn't it? and he decided he was going to shore up the cellar, with like 2 foot of concrete. So he got halfway up that lot and died. And I think probably hard work. It's a bit like the one-armed wallpaper hanger, hardest working man in the country. So this is a story anyway. So we never met him. But anyway, this place was on the market, but it was a derelict greengrocer's. There was and mice nests, and we had all the potatoes and the vegetables and all this stuff, and it was empty. But it had a flat over the top and at the back. So there was the shop at the front, and at the back we had a kitchen and a little bathroom on the top, which was quite nice because in fact, I never said, when we were in Battersea up to the age of 7, we only had an outside loo and the tin bath on the wall, and so moving to Fulham into the police flat was absolute luxury because we had an indoor bathroom and toilet, it was fantastic.
I must admit, I cannot, yes, I haven't lived, have I?
No, but we get into this thing, Guy and I get into this, and he goes, luxury, outside toilet, God, we had pot in ground, we had to go on. So, and then you have to come up with something even more.
Even more. It's all a bit Monty Python, isn't it?
Luxury. You had all in the ground. God, we had to travel 2 miles in the stream. So anyway, so we used to have a lot of fun with that. So trying to go back to those days. So so we found this shop and it had a kitchen at the back and a little bathroom and 3 bedrooms upstairs. Mm-hmm. Yeah, cellar down below, which was a semi-built bomb shelter. And it was, I don't know how many square foot it was, but it wasn't very many, was it? It was 2 shops knocked together. And there's pictures of it, obviously, inside. So Dad said, well, how about this then? And in those days, Stoke Fields was a road to nowhere. You had to come off, you could only get into it from North Street, and you went down Stoke Fields, and it banjoed round on itself. You couldn't, the York Road, there wasn't the York Road for people that know the area. The York Road wasn't there, It was, there was a petrol station right next door to us. And we've got some photos. We have got some old black and white photos of what it was like in those days, when we moved in, and the building we've subsequently moved to in Hayden Place, which got renamed. So there's this little old place, and Guildford is like a 1-horse town. The only other music shop was Rumbelows, I think it was. Yes,
right.
It was called Rumbelows, which was like
general store, wasn't it?
Yeah, or Barnes and Avis. It became called or something like that. It was like a general, like Curry's. Mm. Yeah, they did electrical stuff, and so that was the local competition. And I thought, no competition there, sort of like, because they weren't really a specialist music shop.
Yeah.
They were. And we are looking now late 1963. Mm-hmm. Okay, so the Beatles have, the Beatles are riding high. There's this massive beat boom, and every kid on the block wants to be a guitar player. There's no product about. There were, I was thinking back, like, you had some European manufacturers like Framus. Mm-hmm. Framus, what were some of the other ones? Like weird little German and Swiss guitar makers and a bit of stuff. There were obviously Gibson and Fender around. Vox was big by that time, Marshall, so it's a good bit of kit. Trixon drums, remember them? Trixon? No? Okay, so they were really big at one time. And then Sonor, was that still going, aren't they? German. But Trixon, I think, got a feeling Trixon was German. But they made these weird sort of drums which are like conical shaped, You probably can Google it and get some pictures of it and things like that. But So we're in this wonderful beat boom, this 1963, and so we and Dad says, well, what do you think about this then? Because this, I remember how much it cost. It was £4,200, and we could buy the freehold.
You bought the freehold?
Yeah.
I didn't
So
know.
it was 4,200 quid. I'm pretty sure that was the amount, and it was an amazing risk for Harry to take, you know, like when I think back.
Yeah.
Real gamble. But he worked out that, you know, with the little loan we had, the amount of credit that I could get from the wholesalers, the help from Harry, our gig money, and his police pension, which was index linked, and it was a good police pension. Mm-hmm. So he'd worked it out that we could survive even if we, you know, only turned over and I think that was, I think that was my dad's vision for it, the dream. He'd seen Harry Webber out, you know, like a nice lifestyle, just pottering about in a music shop and selling a bit here and there. And if he didn't like if he didn't like some hoity-toity woman that came in and said, "Do you sell violin strings?" you know, and is that all you've got? You know. So I was always a sort of go-between. You know, hang on a minute, madam. You know.
Yes, Andertons isn't like that anymore.
And it's difficult because it's a real shame I haven't got a good photo, you know, like a vivid memory of some of this stuff, because it was funny, and we built a trapdoor to get stuff in and out of this cellar. We didn't have any stairs in those days, so we decided to build a trapdoor, and we used to pull it up and open it and put a ladder down, you know, and we used to use that as a storeroom, you know. And one day some guy fell down. So there was no health and safety, you know. And you think today, you know, God, we could have got sued and all sorts of things. But so anyway, so it's 63. So there's a fantastic, you know, movement in music, and when did the pirate ships start? You know, as Radio Caroline, you know, the pirate radio stations. You know,
I thought that was all ready.
Well, this was all kicking off around this time, you know. So like it was just exploding, you know. So and Great Britain, you know, everybody wanted a dose of the Union Jack. You know, we were flying high. We were so proud to be British, you know, like we were leading the world in fashion, you know, like Carnaby Street, and we used to go up to the West End and the fashion and the music scene, and you know, it was just amazing. So timing wise, you know, I don't think you couldn't do it today, you know, but the timing was so right for us. And so what happened was my dad stayed on in the police force. I quit Harry Webber's with his blessing, fortunately, and started running back and forwards up the A3 between Fulham and Guildford, and started gutting the shop, you know, on my own, you know. So used to go up there for a few days, and Dad would come and join me weekends, you know. So again, he was amazing, you know. It's like he'd go, "Oh, hang on, I think we need a stud wall there or something," and I go, "Oh, you know, hang on," and he'd disappear out in the garden, you know, and he'd come in, you know, and he'd had it sort of all built and plonk it in, and it was just amazing like that, you know, sort of could do stuff. So we used to sleep on a mattress. We used to sleep on this old mattress upstairs in one of the bedrooms, with a little kettle going, you know, on the floor. And so that's how we got the shop ready. So it was all done on absolute shoestring, you know. It was real shoestring. We made everything. We made the sign. We cut the letters out of plywood. If you see,
I think we have got a picture
or
of that.
painted. I think we used to, you know, and we just handmade everything. You know, we did all the fittings ourselves and stuff. And this pegboard was great in those days, you know, pegboard and bent nails, you know, for fittings.
That's what he looks like.
And Daddy?
Dad.
Yeah.
I can remember Dad so much like this, like as he is like that.
This is the first few weeks
Yeah.
in the shop. You can see that they've got the musical instruments behind them. Mind you, we spent quite a long time cleaning it up. Why did we have to clean
Because
it up?
it was a vegetable shop.
Greengrocers, yeah. Yeah.
Oh, but I looked at all the potatoes on the stairs.
Daddy had me cleaning the shop floor for £2 on a Saturday.
You?
Yeah.
Or was it me?
Oh, and you. You were the stalwart, I was the weekender. Can you remember what the first day's takings were?
Oh, about 9pence. And Dad's ringing up and saying, how much done today, Pete? He said, I didn't tell you.
That's because Pete was having to
Look after everything.
do everything while Dad was finishing out his few months in the police.
So we opened on D-Day. I always remember this. It's a very special date for me. The 6th of June, 1964. We opened, and I was on my own with Mum. So I think we obviously must have moved in there a week or two before. So dear Sylvia, my mum, she was mum to everybody. You know, to come out in the shop. She was a lovely lady, wasn't she? She was just had such a charm about her. Everybody loved her. And she didn't know anything about any gear, but she would have a go, you know. She'd and she'd make people a cup of tea, or you know, like she always say every time, if you had any breakfast, do you want, you know, like all these you know, local sort of gigging musicians would come in looking like, you know, hungover, and she'd go, do you want some egg and bacon? Wow, this is
nice.
This is a great music shop, this one. So we got started, and it just went berserk, you know. Then my dad finally handed his notice in to finish in the September, and what did he do? He took leave. He took his annual leave and everything else, and he then came down full time. He was working. He was running backwards and forwards between Guildford and Hammersmith, because I think that was the last station he ended up at. And juggling days off and all that sort of stuff, whatever they do, you know. But then full-time September in 1964. And it was just unbelievable. It was just, you know, we could not get enough kit.
Right.
And you probably can't imagine, or you might be able to imagine, because it was a bit like that here at times, wasn't it, when we reopened in 1991 with queues of people on a Saturday. And this little shop, we used to have people queuing, right, to get in the store. And we had to have a guy just saying, what, one in, one out, you know.
That's mad.
Yeah, it was just absolute mad. But you couldn't get enough kit. And when the rep, I always remember the rep from Boozy and Hawks coming down, because we used to do Ajax drums. There was another drum make which were made by Boozy and Hawks, I think. And he'd say, oh, we've only got red ones and blue ones. Right, we'll have 25 kits of each colour. You know,
Literally that kind of...
those sort of numbers, you know, like we'd have 25 red ones, 25 blue ones, in the hope that you could get 2 or 3, you know, some allocation. You know,
right.
Like, and there were harmony guitars. They were Gretsch, all that sort of stuff. But we were general music shop as well, right? So it was, you know, in amongst all that lot, we're trying to deal with the remnants of the British Empire in Guildford that are the classical musicians. You know, sort of doing brass and woodwind, and we didn't do pianos then, or keyboards, because they weren't really around. So it was a bit difficult, you know, being a general music shop, you know. But our keen.
Was there any famous people in Guildford, or was that still very much? Was that a big difference you noticed moving out of London? That sort of the big famous guys just were all still in London.
Later. Yeah, later quite a few of them relocated to live in and around this area, you know, like Genesis and all those other guys, and Clappers. And Eric was born in Ripley, came from Ripley. And people, so there were quite a few, but not you know, like...
Just mainly local working musicians?
Yeah, mainly youngsters, youngsters. That was our, you know, it was everybody wanted a guitar, and the music scene was really good. But Guildford was a very, you know, very parochial country town then. You know, like they still talked a bit like that.
They didn't talk like that.
They did. They had a slight accent, not as bad as down in the West Country where I am now. but they did. They used. There was I tell you what, the cattle market, the cows and sheep. They used to wheel them in at the top of North Street. We still had a live cattle market. This is before Slyfield Green was opened and the abattoir. So they used to herd the cows and the pigs and the sheep, or bring them in up to the cattle market at the top of North Street. You know, on a weekend or whenever it was. and nothing happened very quickly. I always remember that. If you wanted anything done, you know, like any utilities sorted out, gas or electricity or your phone fixed, you know, some bloke would come down with a pair of welly boots and a cloth hat, you know, and go like that, you know, and you're lucky if you got it done, you know. And so, you know, because coming out of London, the pace was just half of what different nowadays. It's almost like a satellite of London, isn't it, Guildford? But back then it was very quiet country town. It was lovely, you know. It was lovely in some respects. You know.
So what were the challenges? So obviously, I guess most businesses that start up, the challenge will be that there's not enough customers and that everything's hand to mouth. But by the sounds of things, your challenge was the opposite, really, just managing the demand,
getting the stock. Yeah.
So
getting the stock and managing my dad, you know.
Well, that's because that's it. I mean, people won't know. That's an interesting dynamic, then, isn't it? Because you've got your dad, granddad, who wanted to open the business as a way to take his foot off the gas a bit. And
exactly.
But
and
you're
he's 50, you know.
Yeah.
He's 40,
but you're much more ambitious and could see the opportunity. So how did that sort of manifest itself?
In a very difficult relationship ensuing. It ensued, you know, very, very difficult, you know. But at the same time, it was very ambivalent, you know, like love-hate thing, you know. We'd sort of have terrible stand-up rows about things, you know, because he was very, what's the word? Very authoritarian, you know. Like he wouldn't discuss anything. It's going to be like this, you know. And he was great with customers, you know. But behind the scenes, I used to get blamed for everything. You know, I felt I did anyway. I used to, you know, if anything went wrong, it was my bloody fault, you know. And he pulled me out. What I hated most was he'd bawl me out in front of customers, you know, and make me feel like about this big, you know, which is so. So it was difficult, you know. It was a difficult period. So so we go forward. So significant period for me was 66, I think. But the business is going great, you know. Like we're covering the rent, not the rent, the mortgage. So we had quite a big mortgage. So that was one thing that obviously my dad had negotiated. Whether we had a bank loan, I don't know. We had a weird bank manager back then, you know, NatWest bank manager. I used to go in and see him in Guildford, and I said, "What do you sell? Guitars, electric guitars, yeah." You know, drums and things like that. Who buys those sorts of things? He'd say, you know, and I said, "Oh Christ, you know." I knew, you know, that was why I was telling you about my thing about authority figures, you know, because here was somebody who was in authority, and I couldn't get what I wanted, you know. I just wanted a bloody bank loan. I wanted an overdraft, you know, and he was standing in my way, but he was, you know, he had the power, didn't he? So I used to really, you know, find that very difficult to come up against anybody that, you know, had to battle my way around people like that. But anyway, so we get to, we managed, we're doing really well. And as I say, the business is booming. And I think around that time, 66, then I think that was the first time, which is interesting to think back, we started to see the contingents of Japanese people coming over. You know, like groups of 3 or 4 Japs, and they would go around and visit all the music shops in the country. I'm still going back into London to buy from the wholesalers and things like that. And around that time, I did my first deal, you know, big deal, bought a couple of hundred, Fletcher, Coppock and Newman. Are they still going?
No.
Fletcher, Coppock they were Fletcher and Coppock was the name. They were a wholesaler, general music wholesaler. And we got this, I got a deal. I went up there once and they had a batch of classical guitars. And they were really nice, but the tables had twisted very, very, very slightly, you know. So the action was a bit low. And I think there were about 100, I don't know, there were 100 or more of them. And I made them an offer for this 100, for like a container load of these guitars. And I went back and I said, "Hey, Dad, you know, like I managed to pick these guitars up. Look, they're really brilliant. We can sell them for about 25 quid or something like that. You know, and I bought them for 5 or 6 quid. I don't know what the figures were." And he went ballistic, you know. So it'd be things like that, you see, you know. So, I said, I got the credit. They're going, we can buy them on credit, we can pay them back as we sell them. Don't worry, I've negotiated all that. So that was a bit of an insight into things that you could do, like seeing opportunities. And I think was a lot of the where I wanted. If I saw an opportunity, I wanted to go for it. Yeah. So 1966, I suppose. So by that time, we're doing really well. We're covering our overheads, and both Dad and I are drumming every night. I think one of the things that I do remember, which is funny, is we used to bulk the stock out. We used to put our drum kits in the shop window during the day, and then then we had to both take them out at night to go out and do a gig and put them back in the morning.
Were the gigs in London still predominantly?
I was still doing some gigs in London. Yeah.
So you're clocking up the miles as well.
Yeah, but the band. I got into this band in Guildford, and we used to do all the nightclubs around the coast as well. Like Littlehampton, Worthing. There was the Mexican hat, the top hat. We'd travel quite a way. We were.
Which band was that?
Oh, I had 2 or 3 bands. I was in various bands. The other 2000 was the little 3-piece Cream style band I had. But the band that we weren't pro with was the Just Five, a 7-piece band. Wasn't that great? What a great name, wasn't it? The Just Five, and we were 7-piece. This is coming up. So 1966, around that time, I think it was 66, 67, me and Dad were like having a bit of a problem. And dear old Mum was trying to be peacemaker, between us and things like that. And I don't know, it must have been. I look back, I was an angry young man, in those days. I was like that. Very. Am I still like that?
Not for a while.
Hang on. Yeah. P45. But frustrated, I suppose. Frustrated. I really wanted to. I seeing opportunities everywhere. I wanted to do this and do that. And Dad, I realised subsequently, Dad wasn't a businessman. He wasn't really interested in being the boss of a business. He just wanted to, play. He wanted the freedom to be able to enjoy his music and run his dance band. Because by this time he had the Harry Anderton
organ trio,
and 40 fees organs were just starting to come in then. We used to get the old farmers come in. Can I have one of them 40 feesers, please? Sorry.
Absolutely no one in Guildford talks like this at all.
No, they did.
Was it a huge catchment area down to Cornwall or something?
This is 40 years ago, isn't it? 50 years ago. How long ago are we talking? 50 years ago, something. It's crazy. It's a long time.
It is a long time ago.
So we were having problems. So the band was doing more and more work. And we were in with an agency in London called the Arthur Howes Agency, who managed quite a few well-known acts. And we got offered a tour. So I think this is before I busted my leg, yeah. And also around this time, aged about 19 or 20, I got into horse riding. That was my big hobby, I loved that as much as drumming, So I used to go riding every opportunity on Sundays and things like that. And I was a latecomer to it, as you can imagine. At 19, I went with my sister Debbie first time, and she said, "Come along." I said, "Yeah, get off. You never get me on one of those things, you bloody So, but anyway, the first time I got absolutely hooked, and the riding country around outside Guildford, around Blackheath, that was just magnificent. So anyway, I put that in because that will will be quite pertinent to what happened a bit later on. So the first thing was I get the opportunity, the band gets an offer to go professional, and we get an offer to be the backing band for American artists that had a #1 hit in this country, or were quite high up, and they would come over on tour. So and we'd do a 2-week tour. So like we do with the whole of the UK and back, and playing the West End clubs, and the Flamingo Club was always do you know? And I always thought like this. When in one band I was in, we used to back Georgie Fame. Georgie Fame and the Blue Flames were playing in the Flamingo Club, which is in Wardour Street, I think it was in those days. Might not have been, but it was a very really famous loads of black musicians in there, and lots of the guys from all the black guys from Notting Hill and all around that way. So it was a real buzzy place, you know, and they used to get lots of guest artists, and it used to go on until 3 or 4 in the morning, you know, that was like when the club closed. Geordie Fame and Blue Flames, and I used to go and watch a drummer called Phil Stevens who taught Ginger Baker.
Okay.
You know, drug addict, all bloody heroin addicts. I'm amazed how I escaped the drug thing, you know.
Yeah.
Like, or just, you know, never touched me. I think because I was, I don't know, I was too young or whatever. But not John Mayall, another guy come to me. Alexis Corner, does that name ring a bell?
Okay. I don't think so.
Google him. You know,
Okay.
he was Alexis Corner was with Long John Baldry and all this. This was sort of the British, you know, underground music scene going on. There's lots of these guys doing, you know, fabulous stuff. Graham Bond organisation. I was talking about a guy I met in Exmouth, my hometown. He was a huge fan of the Graham Bond organisation, and we were talking about Gino Washington and the Ram Jam band, who we used to support around all the university gigs as well. So anyway, so this band, we were doing really well. You know, I don't think we were like, well, we were fairly competent, I suppose, but we were doing really well. We used to do R&B, so we loved, you know, like our influences were Wilson Pickett, James Brown, and that stuff. I loved playing that, you know, real heavy, you know, sort of James Brown style stuff. And it was good for me because I stopped all the fiddly twiddly stuff. You know, I used to become, because my dad used to try and influence me with Joe Morello, you know, from the Dave Brubeck Quartet, you know, because we've got photos of Joe Morello, famous drummer. He was brilliant. We used to get these guys over, and they used to do drum clinics at the Stoke Hotel.
Yeah.
You know, so my dad was always trying to influence me that way, you know. So, and my love was heavy rock, hard rock. So I'm sort of, you know, trying to develop both sides. It never went anywhere, I don't think. So we did these tours, and I've got to say to Dad, right, I've got this offer, you know, and I'm sort of also thinking, maybe this is my life. I'm gonna break from the business, and because I can't take working with Dad anymore, and I'm gonna make a career in music. So we were doing more and more work on a part-time basis because all the guys in the band all had jobs, and then we had the big decision that comes to every band: shall we?
Yeah.
Can we actually quit our jobs, hand our notices in, and go pro? You know, so we did, and we hired in a trumpet player who was a musician, and we accepted these gigs anyway. So we did these, you know, we did 2 tours. So I disappeared, you know, off, and Harry was a bit upset about that because he had to run the thing on his own, you know, and he didn't know much about electric guitars. He knew his drums, but he didn't know much about anything else, or didn't want to really. I suppose that's the way. So I came back off of those tours, and I had to make a decision, you know.
So you did the tours?
Yeah,
did the tours.
Did the tours.
Roughly how long were you away for?
About a month or so.
Not
over a month. Yeah,
okay, so not like a year or anything.
No. It was only about a month, and then there was a lot of other work. You know, like where I had to disappear from the shop, going to doing recording studios work. We did TV. We did. Might have a sneaky photo coming on screen now of you on television at some point or other. I don't think so. No, not Ready Steady Go. Not, but before Ready Steady Go.
I'll show you. Hang on.
I don't believe it. It was something like Kathy McGowan, I think it was the host of that. Was that Ready Steady Go? No, that's not TV.
I thought that was you on TV.
No, this is just a band. Look, that's me. What a dipstick I looked in the middle. Yeah. No, I mean, I wasn't photogenic, you know, at all. So
where's that from? I always thought that was you doing a band.
No, that's Ricky and the Secrets.
Ricky and the Secrets.
And the guy there, for anybody that's a fisherman, they would know, on the extreme left-hand side, his name's Chris Ball. And Chris Ball is the most famous now carp fisherman in the world. He's, and I met him out in the Gambia, like many years later, about 10, 15 years ago, I met him out in the Gambia, going deep sea fishing, and he was telling me about his life. I hadn't seen him for all those years, Hi, Chris, how you doing? And he tells me he sort of got into carp fishing and writing books about it and all that sort of thing, and he is now, seriously, you can Google this guy, he's the world's leading authority on carp fishing. So there's a little...
And the bass player, apparently...
Anecdotal things.
He got into sheep farming. He's written a book about... he holds the Guinness World Record for the fastest shearing of a sheep. It's really amazing what all the rest of the band went on to achieve. Who knew? Anyway,
so our arch rivals were, who were they? The Stormsville Shakers in Guildford area. The Stormsville Shakers. And what was his name? Phil Goodhands Tate.
Phil Goodhands Tate. Which is a random thing, as my phone buzzed a minute ago, and I've just missed a call from Paul Goodhands Tate.
Paul Goodhands Tate, I don't know.
Phil's son, which is like, what are the chances? Who I know from another Guildford. It's like a hotbed.
Well, there was quite a bit of stuff going on there, like I suppose as in most other towns and cities, I mean, not as much as like some of the other stuff that was going on in Birmingham and Manchester and Leeds and all those other towns, but. Anyway, so there was so where did I get to? What was I doing?
So you've got back from the tour and you've got to have a moment where you're either going, what am I doing?
That's it. Yeah, where's my, what have I got to do? What
fork in the road.
Yeah. And I think I was very, I wanted to be a millionaire. I wasn't
right.
I mean, I was just convinced I would one day be a millionaire. I don't know how. How are you going to do that? So, but it's a sort of driving thing that you got when you're 25 or whatever it is. And I got married by then. I think got married in 1969, so a bit later. Anyway, I had to make this, monumental, emotional decision. Was I going to, stay in the business, or was I going to cut loose? And that was one of my emotional problems. I'd never left home.
Right.
So, like most people get the opportunity to leave home and go and like having a taste of it, going off and touring, because I never went to university or anything like that. So, I sort of felt like I was still tied to my mum's apron strings, and she was a bit like that. She was, oh, darling. And I said, hang on, Mum, I'm 55. So whatever it was later on. Come on, son. Do you want a butty sandwich? So emotionally very, very traumatic, really. Anyway, I made the decision, didn't I, I don't think I want to go pro. And I think probably because Dad would have, I don't know, I couldn't sort of leave him.
You felt you'd have let him down, you mean?
Yeah, I couldn't really leave. Although, I suppose that's what I felt, And I never thought back then that, okay, he could get somebody to replace me, I'm sure he could, but we never thought like that somehow, it was... So I go back, and we continued to sort of laugh one day and threaten to kill each other the next, all that stuff. And then the next big move. So the business is doing really well. We still can't get stock. I mentioned Japanese, didn't I? So Japanese stuff isn't around at this time. All these contingents were coming over. With cameras and lovely Nikon cameras, photographing all the stuff, interviewing us about what the trends were and things that we liked and what we didn't like, and they would do this, and their little notebooks, all right. And
tell you what's weird, that still happens now.
Oh, is it?
Every year we'll get usually from Ibanez, Hoshino, Ibanez, and they'll come round, and again it's bizarre because it's almost like it is very. Super polite, very quiet, very. They don't want to take up too much of your time, but you can see them all making notes about trying to predict what the trends are in guitar music and stuff. But
well, I mean, that was the start of the invasion, really. I mean, just and then within, and when I look back, I was telling somebody else, within 10 years, in a single decade, they were dominant, in so much stuff, so 68, 70, and that was when I went over there for the first time. I was as a guest of Yamaha. I went to look around all the factories, Nippon Gaki, in 1978. Just mind-blowing, and I think by that time Yamaha flutes, they'd taken all the flute market. And they were just so. It's still the world's biggest. Still
by a
the
mile.
world's biggest. And what used to amaze me was that the Yamaha musical instrument division is a tiny subsidiary of Nippon Gaki, or it was back then. And they used to make oil tankers. They'd be making outboard engines and all that stuff. But there's still the resources they poured into musical instruments from get-go. Their own trees and raw materials and. Piano factory was just, you just couldn't imagine this piano factory, these grand pianos, going down a slow-moving belt as far as the eye could see, and all these little Japanese girls, doing a bit here and a bit there, and walking along and then walking back, and it's just like Roland. We were developing stuff back then, so lots of electronics coming in.
Yeah.
And then so we got the opportunity of buying the shop. Or getting a lease on it, I think, first of all. We took a lease, that's right. So this was to rent the shop opposite. It came on the market. It was decorators. That's the other one with the funny old canopy over the front.
Yeah, and that was what, 3 or 4 times the size? 3 or 4 times bigger?
Yeah, we had about 2,000 square feet there. That was also big. There was a top floor and a bottom floor. It was the most weird shape. It wasn't a 190-degree angle.
No, it was a weird-shaped building.
Weird-shaped building. And by that time, I think we had also moved into doing electronic organs, because the electronic organ market had just went like the beat market. Everybody wanted to bloody, and I hated that that genre. Like the home organist.
Yeah.
The home organist entertains. That sort of stuff, and. So we were doing organs, but there was quite a bit of electronic keyboards. The Vox Continental, was a good, and Fender Rhodes pianos, So
it's great.
Oh, wasn't that just the?
Yeah, it's the best sounding.
Yeah. But the things they were, to keep them going with the tines, yeah.
Right.
And the clavinet, the Hohner clavinet was another one.
Did you ever do the Wurlitzer one? Because I remember seeing a guy. I was in a band once with a guy that had like a Fender Rhodes, but a Wurlitzer version. It just sounded great.
Yeah, they did. Yeah, but the clavinet was a great. The Hohner clavinet was like a clavinova.
Right.
But it used to use metal tine. Like a metal thing.
Oh, okay.
But a sticky pad that came down on it. So the sticky pad you press the key, and the sticky. That's how it used to work. The pad was stuck to the tine, and as you pressed the key, it lifted the tine and released it, and it came back down and stuck on it, and then released it. So you got this sort of
weird sound.
Yeah, but it was very popular because these were the first keyboards and things. So that sort of stuff was around, which was quite interesting. Anyway, so we get the opportunity of moving, or we get this opportunity, right, going over the road. It's quite an expensive lease. It's a lease in those days, and this is 1968, I think, wasn't it? Yes, 68. But it's a big shop, so we can display lots more gear, brass and woodwind, and more amplification and everything else like that. And I'm sort of going, but in those days, I didn't have much of a. I wasn't doing the books or the the finances or anything like that. So I was just going, well, yeah, come on, we can do it. And so, but the responsibility, obviously, for doing, for keeping tabs on the money and doing the management accounting was Dad's. And I didn't really have much of a handle on this and appreciation until much later. I realised how key. It was 2 or 3 years later I realised how key this was to business, to running a successful business. And so we move over there, lock, stock and barrel, and of course it goes berserk again. Like if you can think about that, it's like we got more stock, we got more room. So and we began to employ guys. So we had I think around that time John Hulk joined us, Johnny. And other guys, there were so many good guys around. Jane joined us for the first time. Is Steve Wright?
Steve Wright, I remember.
Steve Wright. Oh, there's loads of good guys around. Yeah. So we had some fantastic staff, some really good guys around. And then, but things are getting worse with me and Dad, and that sort of thing. So as soon as we started employing people, Dad didn't really want to be, the boss. Like he didn't want to sort of. Although he wanted, so he used to blame me for everything. Like again, even more big time now. And so he pushed me. So he'd make me go and do all the negotiating, you know, with the bank manager, with the bloody lawyers, the accountants, negotiate the lease, you know, do all that stuff. Well, no, you go on, you can go and do all that and stuff. And if anything went wrong or like it wasn't satisfactory, it was my fault. Yeah. So it was difficult at times.
How did you resolve that ultimately?
I decided, well, this comes forward quite a way,
right?
Because you were around back then. So you started. When were you about 14 when you started as a Saturday boy?
So
what year
late 80s, you know, 87, 88, something like that.
Quite a long way forward.
Yeah,
then.
I don't ever remember
late 80s.
working with Grant. I have vague recollections of going in there and seeing him working in there, but in my mind I'm thinking I'm maybe going
through all the smoke in the shop. Yeah, because everybody used to smoke, and Dad and I were like we used to say we were like the team coaches. You know, Surrey. We used to smoke for Surrey, and we always had a fag going on the counter, you know, and that stuff. And winding forward a little bit, people won't remember this, but in the 70s we had this thing called the 3-day week when the miners went on strike. We had no power for 4 days out of every 7, you know. So we only had power, so we used to have to, you know, like we couldn't demonstrate any electrical gear, and so
dear old John Hulk,
yeah,
who many Andertons customers from that time will remember, and who often used to think John was my dad, because I think John would be seen in the store more than you were. But John tells a story.
This is a bit later.
Yeah. But John tells a story when you first started selling stage lighting. You know, disco lighting or stage lighting.
That's when we opened across the road.
And that do you want to tell the story about how the fire brigade had to come out one night?
What, because we were stoned or something like that and set fire to the curtains?
Yes.
Yeah, it was a bit. We used to do some crazy stuff over there. You know, it was. We're coming forward a few years now.
Okay.
Yeah, no, we're coming forward into the 70s. But I mean, it was worth it because we used to. This was the days of when Pink Floyd played Stoke Hotel in Guildford. You know, before
or Wooden Bridge in Stoke.
I remember seeing them in the Stoke Hotel with the psychedelic lighting, the splodoscope. It was called, wasn't it? You remember that thing?
No.
The liquid wheel. Do you remember those liquid wheel projectors?
No.
Don't people remember?
No,
those?
I wasn't born then, Dad.
No, I know, but okay. So, well, you must Google this stuff because it was. Well, that was the psychedelia thing, you know. Like, was all these. They were making these liquid wheels, and we used to go up to a place in Chiswick that manufactured them, and they used to demo them to Led Zeppelins, you know, Whole Lot of Love and things like that, you know. And the amazing thing about these splodoscopes, all it was air being pumped through coloured oil inside a round CD-shaped disc with 2 pieces of glass. Mm-hmm. And it had coloured oil inside. And they used to pump air through it somehow. And it was just an illusion, but it looked like the stuff was going in time with the music. So there'd always be a bit of a thing going in time with the music. And it was just, you know, and they had a couple of joints as well. You'd like, that's where it all started. So that was the flower power era and psychedelia and, you know, and... You know, of course, and that was sweeping through the music scene as well. But anyway, I'm going to reel back a little bit. So we're in the shop, and that's doing really well. And then I have an accident on a horse one Sunday morning in January 1968, and I come off this bloody great big white hunter who we were airing, and the horse belonged to the boss of ICI. Because I used to ride out from a hunt yard. In just outside Guildford, and there were lots of hunt horses there, you see, and so, you know, one of the things we would do was exercise them, but these things were oated up and hadn't been out for a while, so it was cold, January morning, you know, really freezing, and I came off this thing really, really badly. I got thrown and got concussion and snapped my femur, my right leg.
Ouch.
And ended up in the mud, you know, in freezing cold mud. They couldn't find me. You know, so by the time the ambulance got to me on a Sunday morning, this was as well, you know, so anyway, so Harry gets a phone call to say I'm in, you know, Royal Surrey County or something like that, you know, on a Sunday morning. They couldn't find a surgeon because he was off playing golf and all this stuff, you know, and because Harry was well pleased, you know, it's like, oh, no, you know, what have you, you know, oh, you and your bloody horses, you know, so that was the start of another traumatic period, where Dad was pretty miffed that I was out of action.
You must have been out of action for 6 months or so.
No, I was out of action for 6 weeks, and then 6 weeks on traction. Mm-hmm. And again, he was lumbered, wasn't he, with him and Mum having to run the shop. So I don't think I probably appreciated it. Did we have any? Well, we had some staff then as well, so I think so. It wasn't too bad. And I was hobbling around on crutches, but I was a lot of psychological pressure on me to come back and get in the shop, So I was hobbling around on crutches, like in the shop trying to serve and lift gear around and things like that. And then subsequently, the bone never knitted in the leg, so it snapped again, or the nail, either this metal pin in my leg called a Kunchner nail, and I snapped that, and by is this 70? Mum and I were engaged then. You're Anita. We were engaged, so that was a difficult period. So eventually I wasn't fully weight bearing for 14 months altogether.
Wow.
And that was a real decision period in my life, because I couldn't play drums. Mm. So I think
difficult, yeah.
Yeah, and I thought, so what am I going to do? Because drumming was, I really wanted to. So I thought to myself, again, it's like one of these things, and you go, I think I'm going to concentrate on the business. We're going to take the business as far as we can, pack up drumming, and again, because I wasn't that great anyway, so I was hard on myself. If I couldn't be absolutely fantastic, I thought it was better not to play at all. So, which is an awful thing, isn't it? Like fear of failure.
Yeah.
So abstain from it.
It's a shame.
Probably why I bunked off school. So, but I did play. I did play a little bit. I went back and did a little bit, but again, didn't hook me. But what really hooked me was business. Mm-hmm. I enjoyed the cut. I enjoyed being an entrepreneur. Seeing opportunities and seeing how you could improve this or do better there. And we secured some good franchises. I was talking about H&H. Mm-hmm. So we had some really good product franchises which were taking off like mad. So I'm now so I finally got through that period in 1969, got married. We're into the 70s. So the 70s were a period which was pretty good. And then I think around that time we had a lot of problems with clash, I suppose, really, between the classical customers and the rock guys, who was, again, one of our... lots of bands like Camel came from around this way, didn't they? And there's the Stranglers.
Right.
Come on. The Stranglers, right? So this is... Before, so they, and they were real punky, So with that, so there was that type of customer coming in, rubbing shoulders with, the school teacher who wants, some violin strings, that sort of thing. So
yeah.
So we said, this is not working. We need to. Oh, that's right, because we'd be, there'd be some guy in the corner going kerrang, like winding it up. And there's the classical customer saying, "Must I put up with all this noise? Can't you turn that down?" Down, as they used to say, down.
That's exactly how people from Guildford speak, by the way.
So there was a clash, and then I thought, I've got to do something about this. So we were then doing this stage. This is going through the 70s, so you can imagine this is a sort of, there's bits and pieces going on all the time. We started to do pianos, upright pianos, but we had to carry them up the bloody stairs, like that's why I've crocked my back and why I'm sort of... But we used to carry organs and pianos up the stairs, and I used to be the one on the bottom, Oh, bloody things we used to do. And we used to dread selling. I used to dread selling the piano
because you couldn't get it back down.
They had to come back down. Yeah. So anyway, eventually, after a year, I persuaded Dad to invest in a hoist, like a forklift truck. So we had a forklift truck outside and punched a hole in the wall, and we used to take them in that way. But so that, all that was going on in the 70s. We were doing really well. What other stuff came in? We were one of the first, what was the very first synthesizers that were made in Putney? I can't remember the name. There were some around the time
made in Putney.
Yeah, EMS. Would it be? EMS, something like that.
I don't know.
There was around the time of Moog.
Yeah.
Right, there were Moog in the States, but there was a guy who down in the UK who was manufacturing a suitcase synth. Little suitcase synth. So we had the franchise for this stuff, and we were selling these things hand over fist. So that was interesting period. So this is when this is the first genre coming into music and taking off in all sorts of ways. Did I start playing again? I think I might have started doing a little bit of work in the odd band. But I can't know. To be honest, I can't remember. It's all a blur. So
I think the 70s was for a lot of people.
Yes.
I don't know why, but I think it was.
Yeah. So and then you came along, 1974.
Yes. Two. Thank you. That's the other.
72.
Yes.
Sorry. 72. Oh, that's it earlier. So there's a lot going on there. So 72, 74. So the responsibility now. The responsibility of being a dad. You know about this.
Yes.
I was being a dad, it's like, oh Christ, and one of the things that used to stress me out all the time with running your own business, and you have to remember I've never worked for anybody other than sort of part-time for Harry Webber, which was an easy job. But having never worked in a corporation or anything else, and trying to, when you're self-employed, so we were both self-employed, there's a terrible inner fear all the time that somebody's going to turn the tap off, that the business is going to just dry up. It's going to stop. And it's one of the drivers. I think if you talk to a lot of guys that are in that sort of thing, and you're constantly, the business is sucking money all the time, so you're constantly putting everything at risk. So like the first house we bought was in 1969 when we got married. So the first house was hocked to the bank. To support the overdraft, that good old NatWest. So that was, and so that's the start of the sense that you're always on the coat hanger for something, for something or other. So where do we wind forward to now? Where do we go through the 70s?
When did you buy, or how did you buy Grandad out?
Just before that, that was when I got my first. Oh, I know. So we opened this shop in North Street, didn't we? That was the first. That was what I was saying. So we opened this shop in North Street, and we moved all the classical stuff up there. But that was expensive. It was owned by Lloyd's Bank. It was brand new. It's where Sevenoaks is now. I think it's still there.
It is.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Well, I took the lease on that, but I had a terrible time convincing Lloyd's Bank that I was good enough to, for the lease. Because in those days, unless you were a blue chip company and you had fantastic set of accounts, you couldn't get a lease. They didn't want to know about you. You go, well, what do you do? What do you do? Sell electric guitars? And oh God, No, that's what it was like. So. And you're dealing with a lawyer, or something, the intermediary. So again, my sort of like really, it's just to do me. Anyway, I don't know how, but I managed to persuade them that we would be good for the rent, and they should take a punt on us, whatever. I still don't know how I managed to convince them, and the bank as well. So that's what we did. So we moved all the classical stuff up into North Street, pianos, and moved Harry up there.
Ah. So that was a way of managing the relationship, was it? Was to put you in one building and him in a different one, and give you your own mini empires to
and we were completely then all rock and roll, so we'd make as much noise as we wanted, and like drums and stuff.
Well, how did he feel about that then? Because I thought he liked the drums. I mean,
yeah, he did. I don't know. I sort of, I don't know, but he sort of went up there, and we had a guy up there who was a manager. So Dad, I think he just liked to go up there, but he wasn't full time up there.
Right.
And around that time, I began to realise we had to get rid of move my auntie out, who used to do our accounts, bless her. And my mum was still working in the business. It was very much a sort of, very much a sort of typical family business. But you realise that was when I really needed. I had two shops, and I didn't know what the hell was going on. You know, I didn't know how to handle how much could I buy. And then, because we were sort of pressured in a way into opening Reading, so it opened up in Reading as well, mainly because of the HH franchise. So they were threatening to give us, because we had a big catchment area in those days, you know, sort of lots of people came to us from all the surrounding counties. And and I was sort of forced, pressured into opening in Reading to maintain the agency for HH amplification, it was a mistake. So we never really did very well out there. We couldn't afford to get into the town, and the only property available again was outside the town, but that was rented. So here I'm now renting Hayden Place and renting Reading and renting North Street, right? And, you know, this is starting going. Anyway, I was determined I was going to buy. So I kept pestering the dear old lady who lived in Weybridge, lovely lady, to sell me Hayden Place. And I finally persuaded her to sell back in the mid-1970s or something like that. So that enabled me to get a freehold building to try and release some personal equity from the bank, you know. But I think in those days, obviously needed a mortgage, so that was hocked again. You know, the building was hocked. But I began to get a flavour for, you know, for property and doing that sort of stuff in the background. And I saw Reading as an opportunity as well, because there was a flat over the top of that, and it was rented out at the moment. But anyway, so coming forward, so late 1970s, I think I'd had enough really. It got too difficult with the family, and I was trying to bring in an accountant to do management accounting, you know, so a bookkeeper, so that we knew what the hell was happening. You know, I didn't know, and I was interested in that time in business. I always used to read lots of business books, you know, the 1 Minute Manager, and Michael Gerber was one of my gurus. You know, the guy who wrote the E-Myth.
Yes.
I don't know if
I think you forced me to read that once.
No, but Michael Gerber was one of his mottos was, you know, learn to work on the business, not in it.
Yes.
You know, and he always used to cite Ray Kroc, the founder of McDonald's. You know?
Yes.
Ray never fried a hamburger in his life. You know, never fried any French fries. You know, he just worked on the business, not in it. So that was his. Anyway, he was very successful, Michael Gerber, still is, I think, in this E-Myth thing. So I did a few of those courses, and I used to love all this stuff. And I finally, and it came to the watershed was 1981. And unfortunately, Mum and I got divorced then. I think it was in 1981, wasn't it? The marriage went down the pan. And at the same time, I said to Harry and Mum, look, you've got to retire. You know, either I'm going, either I'm going to go and make my way somehow. I don't know what I would do. But the other problem was, up until that time, everything was in my dad's name. You know, the whole business was in Dad's name, and I realised I didn't. I think I was made a partner, but not, you know, didn't have any equity in the business or anything else like that. So Harry and I don't know how old he would have been then. He would have been 50, 60, in his early 60s. And we worked out a deal anyway. So he was very gracious, I think, in saying, worked out a deal and to retire him and Mum, and pay him off, you know, like gradually buy him out, like a pension. But at the same time, you know, I just did not know. You know, I don't know whether this is an anecdotal story, but other things that I remember now from running the business was getting called into the bank manager's office. I must have told you this story. Good old NatWest Bank called me into the office and said, "Oh, Pete, can I come and see you?" Yeah, sure, come in. Graham, somebody or other, his name was. Says, I see your house. He said, I see your house is in the paper. You're up for sale. You know, what's happening? Oh, well, I'm getting divorced. Got divorced. And we got to sell the house. And he said, so I'm very sorry to hear that. He said, well, you realise that the bank's in joint names. We've got, you know, all your overdraft, which was at that time was £250,000 for stock across 3 shops. It's a lot of money in those days. And he said, loans and overdraft and everything else. He said, Well, he said, I can't, because I can only look at half the equity in the house. So do you think you can arrange to repay, 50% of the overdraft? Thank you, Lord. How, do you want to kick me in the other? So that all fell on top of me all at once, like that, and the emotional problem of getting divorced, going through, realising my marriage was on the rocks. And a lot of that was down to, being stressed out all the time, running the business, and I don't think I was a very good husband and a dad. I don't know, but when you're running a business, it is difficult, isn't it? But you've managed to find that balance, which is great. But so it's interesting, looking back on all this stuff. So I managed to retire Harry in 1981, and I decided it had to be what I called my sackcloth and ashes period.
Yeah.
So I had a Jag.
I remember.
XJS.
Yeah, that went, didn't it?
Went.
And the Sirocco came in,
replaced
didn't it?
with a second-hand old banger of a Volkswagen Sirocco, which is a good little car. Sold the house. We had a nice house, and we managed to make a lot of money on that because I bought that new in the 1970s when inflation was running at 15% and house prices were going like, whoa, So, but we had to get out of there, so sold that. Moved into a flat and enough money for Mum to buy a place, and because you guys were at private school, weren't you? So you and Guy, and looking to how to do all this. So anyway, sackcloth and ashes period. So I thought, right, bugger this. I got to sell. So I closed North Street branch, handed back the lease, or did I sell the lease? I can't remember. I think I managed to sell the lease. Get out of that with no problems. And around the same time I managed to sell Reading as a going concern to a pilot, to a British Airways pilot. Arthur Hamer, his name was. It made sure these things come back. How you doing, Arthur, if you're still around?
And that's the music store Hamer's then? That's what it became, was it?
Yeah.
Ah.
Yeah. So Arthur, he just wanted an investment.
Yeah. So, I'm 99.9% sure that's not still there.
Yeah, and
but,
Pete, another drummer, a famous drummer, he became a drummer who managed the place for me. But it was very difficult, having a manager out there running Reading, and I was so relieved. So it was a sackcloth and ashes and consolidation period. So I was able to get rid of the Reading store. Rent the property out, so still kept the lease, but at some point or other I was able to buy it. It was owned by the co-op. So again, I was a bit more savvy in terms of the property aspect, so I managed to buy the freehold there, put the guy back in as my tenant, got rid of North Street. I now owned Hayden Place, and property values were going up and up and up, which is good. So, so I was now able to finance the business without having to put my personal assets up for grabs, because from that day onwards, I vowed I would never ever hock myself into the bank or have myself and my wife, like any joint family assets, hocked to the bank in case the tap turned off. That is a case of the tap going like that, and you go, oh my God, what are we going to do? And you've got staff and all this sort of stuff, so it is very stressful, and I didn't realise just how stressful all this was until I sort of fell over in the year 2000, went into hospital for 6 months, not 6 months in hospital, but had to take a back seat. But that's coming forward. So, but that was a great period. So
a great period in what sense?
Well, 1980s.
Oh, as in just the business was still doing
we had
well.
one shop, it was just rock and roll, and that I think was around the time we opened the disco thing across the road.
Right.
So it was late 70s, early 80s. And John was running pretty much the whole thing, and I started designing office furniture. Yeah. Do you remember that BPS Gates company?
I often wondered, people won't know this, but yes, my early memories of the store, and certainly when I started working there, you were quite distant from the music industry, and you'd started this other business, as you say, designing office furniture, which was successful as well. But would you become disillusioned with music, or not music itself, but had you kind of? I vaguely recollect you sort of feeling like it just was too small. You know, it was very cottage industry. Well, it was. We used to say the music business in those days was a bit of a joke. We used to total turnover of the music business in the UK was a third of the Kit Kat business, cat food industry or something.
That's
right, yeah.
It was tiny.
No, that was the stat, wasn't it? That Sainsbury's or the supermarkets would sell more chicken flavour cat food than the whole of the music industry added up. So, but was that frustrated you because your sort of entrepreneurial desire to be a millionaire or whatever it was, you just went, I don't think I can do this in the music industry? Or
I think to some degree, and I'd also seen the other stores going down the multi-store route, you know, who'd fallen on their backs and gone bust. There were quite a few. Southeast Entertainments comes to mind. I don't know whether that one, that's way back then, but they were one of the first sort of chains to explode, open up lots of shops, and there were several went to the dogs, you know, went into liquidation and back in that time. And having had 3 shops myself, and the problems of running a second shop, your problems double.
Yeah.
And then they sort of quadruple, you know, like, because you always get, you know, you got a remote shop and the bloke phones in the manager, oh, I'm sorry, I can't come in today because I'm sick, you know. I was very, very conscious of the customer, you know, like providing the best customer service that we could, because that was my other thing that I was interested in from a business point of view, was sales and marketing, but customer experience, you know, same thing. Like, how do you serve the customer, you know, best? But I think you came up with came up with the best mission statement for us, wasn't it? It was enabling people to make a good buying decision, you know, so that they feel happy with what they've bought, you know, rather than.
Oh, that was.
Well, I thought it was great. It was good because you managed to, epitomise what the mission statement was. I never was able to put it in that context so easily. So we'd condensed down in 1981, and again it was great. We had, you know, so I was still involved. I had just I had a little office upstairs. And I was riding again, so, you know, because I got back on a horse, and I bought my own horse, you know, so I had my own horse, and I was going riding, and I had this. So I started this. I think what it was, I personally, I'm sorry I'm talking about myself all the time. It's very narcissistic, isn't it? Egocentric. This. I apologise, but I don't think, you know, I apologise for this, but it's just always trying to find out who I am, you know, what drives me. But I was frustrated, I think, because, you know, I missed that opportunity of never going to the College of Art and Design, and I had a real desire to sort of, I don't know, make or design things, and this opportunity to I could have done it in the music business, I suppose, but the opportunity never arose, you know. But this opportunity arose in this computer furniture, because we bought our first computer back then, you know. I mean, it was such a novelty for a music shop to have a computer, you know. It used to take us all weekend to program the stock turnover, you know. It was absolutely dire, you know, dial-up modem. But it's set me off on that road, you know, of developing systems, stock control systems. How can we, you know what's going on in the business? And one of the mandates, or the things that used to that echoed with me, was, if you're going to make a decision in a business, you know, 99% of the time it will be have a financial bearing. Can I afford to buy this? Can I afford to employ this person? You know, can we build this? Can I do this? It always had a financial, you needed some financial data. And if that financial data was flawed, you know, your decision was flawed. Yeah. So I was very keen on making sure that we had the best data. What's happening today in the business, not, you know, 2 years down the line like it was in those days when you had your annual accounts, you know, done. I definitely remember that being the bit that took me the longest to get my head round. Not get my head round, but because it's. You know, if you're into music and you love playing the guitar and you love dealing with customers and it's so exciting, the idea of producing management accounts is so utterly dull. But you do realise, you're absolutely right, once you just,
there's too much money and too many transactions going on all the time to try and make every decision based on a gut feeling that it's the right one, you know. And if, as you're absolutely right, if the data's, I suppose that the only thing worse than having no data is wrong data.
Yeah.
Because then it's even worse, you know.
Well, and again, I think I used to do the odd management course and all this stuff, and I used to read that they said, you know, you've got to get behind the business, like on the, you know, if you imagine it's like a horse and cart, it's no good you running along in front of the horses, you know, leading the horses. You've got to get in the driving seat and drive the horse. So so it's about delegation, which, you know, I was crap delegator, you know, but
I mean, we should. So if we the office furniture business is almost like it's another chapter, and for people watching this, probably less interesting. But
it was interesting because it gave me another stream of income.
Yeah.
Okay. So I now had this, and it gave me an outlet for my design and. You know, for my expression design. I mean, you know, I won back then. I won a couple of awards for design. I became a member of the design council.
Oh, cool! And
I won a silver award for the cardboard box one of the cardboard boxes we put in. Well, it's cardboard engineering, you know, a silver award. So I was quite pleased, you know. And we did it. And Russell Morgan joined us then.
I remember.
Another drummer friend.
Yes.
But it got. Then we, you know, that business sort of started to go berserk, you know, like we got into bed with some partners in Germany and had manufacturing plant in Hanover and all that stuff, you know. So, you know, my focus was very much in there, and but I got fed up, you know. I could not make decisions. I could make decisions about the music business, and but it wasn't going anywhere, you know. It was trucking along, it was doing okay. And we didn't really want to go down the multi-store route, but we were sort of stuck on how to upscale it, how to scale it up, because, you know, we were at capacity where we were for square footage. So, and that was around the time, again, 1981 now, I divorced, sackcloth nazi period, so through their BPS gates, and then we get into the late 1980s, and you are just coming out of, where are we now, about 1989, 1990. But I still like being at the sharp end of the business, you know. But I found I couldn't run it from the front, you know. I couldn't be in the front doing customers and all that, and also, you know, trying to run the business with that. So I had to take a step back and physically, you know, move back from the business, which was difficult, you know. It's hard. But then I got rid of the BPS Gates business, the computer furniture business, because I had a gut full of trying to deal with the German guys, and you had been working in the store for a few years with the broom, you know, Saturday boy, but was a good salesman, you know. He really had a good feel for it, and were very, you know. But I didn't want to pressurise you. This is interesting. I don't know if it's interesting for other people, but might be for members of the family. But I never wanted you, because of the relationship I'd had with my dad, I did not want a repeat of that. Yeah. And I absolutely wanted you to come into the business of your own volition if you wanted to, but ideally to bring another skill to it. So you had your own skill set there, you know, like.
I definitely remember you not wanting me to join the business, you know. And again, I think it was probably still, that was perhaps what added to the sort of my sense that you were disillusioned with it all, because I just think you just didn't see it as something that I'd be able to make the kind of career in, as if I'd gone and done something else. Yeah. But yes, I don't know, I had the bug for it bad, you know, really bad, and it was all I wanted to do. And I think from a timing point of view as well, I was very lucky that you had the opportunity to move the business again into an even bigger premises, which gave me the sort of platform a bit later on to.
Well, in the history, like the dynamics of the business, there was that momentous day when your teacher phoned me up from Guildford College. Remember that?
I do.
And he said, because I'd persuaded you to go back to uni.
Yeah,
I persuaded you to go back to college.
Uni, yeah. Mm.
So I persuaded you to go back to college, to get, you only needed about 3 or 4 more points in order to go to university. And I was trying to encourage you to go to university and get a degree in business management or some skill that you could bring into the business, accountancy or something like that.
Can you imagine me as an accountant?
I know. But I didn't want you to, I wanted you to have some experience of the outside world before coming into the family business, because family businesses can be awfully claustrophobic, they can be really, really difficult, as you know, with like when the different problems you have. So so that fateful day, the bloke from the college phoned up and said, "Mr. Anderton, do you know where Lee is?" No, he's doing it, sitting exam, and he with you in the college. He said, "No, he isn't here."
And hadn't been there for months, which is ironic, really, isn't it?
Yes.
But there we are. I got the mother of all bollockings.
No, you didn't. No, come on. I thought I was really. Okay, maybe over the phone, but I thought I was a really cool dad, actually.
No.
Because I said, "Come on, let's go and have a beer and talk about this."
That is not how it happened at all.
Oh.
I came into the shop and John Hulk looked at me and he went, "What have you done?" And I'm like, "What?" And he's like, "You need to go upstairs and see your dad."
How old are you? 17?
18, something like that. So I realise now that that's it. I've been found out in the last 6 months of not going to college, even though I told you I was. And honestly, the smoke was coming out of your ears when I walked into that office. You made me write you a written apology.
Did I?
Yeah.
God.
You made me write you a written apology.
No wonder they say I was hard but fair.
Well, and that was the fateful day where you just went, that here's a broom, and because that was up until that point I'd just been part-time, that was when you literally just got, and it was just, here's the broom.
My memory is different then. Okay, maybe my heart memory is different then, but I remember sort of sitting down with you and at some point or other, once I let off steam and saying, well, what do you, I know I did this, and said, what do you want? What do you want to do? What do you want to make of your life? Where do you want to go? Because at that time you were just fiddling around with guitar, weren't you?
I've never been a...
No, but you were in a school band and you were pretty good. We used to come and see you up at, where was it? The
Mean Fiddler.
The Mean Fiddler,
yes.
Yeah. And it was a great...
It was good. It was a good little band, but I never, ever did it ever cross my mind that I might do that professionally. Definitely not, no.
So, I listened. And it was then when you said, I just want to come in the business. And it was like a bing moment, oh Christ, I hadn't seen this. I really just did not realise that your passion was to be part of the business or come in the business. So I went, bloody hell. Right, okay, that's it then. So the first thing we need is here's if Lee wants to really get behind this, I've got to give him a vehicle to show what he can do. So I at that time the property market, the end of the 1980s, this was there was
big crash,
big recession. Okay, 1988 I think it was a massive recession, a crash, and the opportunity. I saw this building. We're almost here, isn't it? Where we are.
Well, pretty much, yeah. The current store.
Current store. 80 was on the market. The refrigeration wholesaler or something had owned it, and again it was derelict. It was absolutely, there was ivy and brambles growing up through the floor and everything else. So we saw this, didn't we? And we went and had a look at this, and so I thought, okay, this is it. This is the opportunity of moving into. We've got really big premises. It's going to need, it's going to need some doing up. But it was again big gamble. So I gambled all my pennies. I hocked everything I had, except the flat. I still kept. I think I wouldn't allow myself to do the flat. But all the business premises I had. By that time, I'd managed to buy Reading.
Right.
I had the Reading, and I'd also managed to buy the flat over the top of it, and it was a rented accommodation, and overnight it transformed from being worthless to quite a few £1,000s because I was able to sell it off freehold. So with all these little aspects going on, so it was like, you know, things were the God was shining on, if you like. You know, the powers that be were favouring me a bit more. I'd been through the mill and was still going through the mill a bit, in that, you know, emotionally. But that and I saw we're going to do this. Yeah. So there's a photograph of you and me outside
on the day you got the keys.
On the day I got the keys, and we're looking at this bloody derelict place, and thinking, you know, bravely, how much have we got to tosh this up then, you know? So we were still trading around in Hayden Place with me, so kept that premises. I can't think what else had happened, whether I'd bought somewhere else or.
No, I mean, that's. I remember
I
at
got
that time.
rid of the disco shop. We
were working in the smaller music store.
Yeah.
Just, you know, whilst you basically put 100% into doing up.
That's right.
The new premises, and I think even that was beset with problems and ended up being 6 to 12 months longer to open,
and twice as expensive.
And so even that got a bit touch and go, didn't it?
Yeah, it crucified me financially, but I was in there every day trying to solve problems. You know, of the foundations. Every time we took a floor away, we found rot and this problem and that problem. It was sucking cash like mad. But we had a good designer on board. We had some great guys doing it, and in the end, I had to employ a project manager and stuff like that. But it just sucked every penny dry.
But I really, really remember that the move from an old store where I think potentially people could still smoke in the store. If they couldn't, it hadn't finished that long ago. But there was still very much that idea that the staff would just eat their lunch on the counter. You know, it was very old school. And we moved to the new store.
New regime.
And it was like, no, it's like, if you want to have your lunch, you go into the room at the back. Yeah. There's no smoking. Yeah. There's no sense. Every staff member then had to wear a t-shirt, you know, branded t-shirt.
Oh, that's right. We actually created a staff. I was able to give the staff somewhere to have their tea and coffee, and you know,
and I remember, absolutely remember a little bit of a backlash from the sort of hardcore old customers going, I don't think I like this new.
Yeah.
But I think you, even at that young age, certainly you and I shared a similar vision that there was another customer that was used to going into quite a high-class retailer to buy anything else they wanted to buy. If they wanted to buy some clothes, or they wanted to buy some hi-fi, or they wanted to buy a new TV, you know, they weren't going to like an old style.
Yeah.
And I just remember that a sort of a sense that perhaps some of the hardcore old customers from the old store were a bit negative about the new store.
Yeah.
But
that's right.
Fortunately, a much larger number of customers went, this is exactly how I want to shop for my musical equipment stuff. And that first, you know, even the first year, but certainly the first 2 or 3 years of being here, the growth was, and this is pre-internet, pre-mail order, this was just in the store sales, went like that. Yeah. And as you say, that was the time when Stuart had started with us as well, and that was...
That's right, April the 1st. You've just reminded me, April the 1st, 1991.
Yeah.
But remember, I had one assistant, back office assistant.
Yeah.
I can't remember who that was back then.
Jean?
No, I think there was somebody before her, I think.
Pam?
Yeah, Pam Connor or something like that. Anyway, but anyway, there was only me and one other person doing all the back office stuff, accounting stuff, and 1991, and the economy went into double dip recession.
Right.
So, you know, I think we remember it being a double dip recession. So I couldn't get, and I was stretched financially, like, you know, out on a limb. I couldn't get more finance. The banks were like,
not interested.
And I chucked everything into it. But I'd bought the freehold. I'd managed to get the freehold on that property, which was, you know, always buy the freehold if you can. And you, after within 2 years, you and Stuart West, I know I've got it wrong about 1910, but you and Stuart were doing at least 50% of the turnover between the two of you, and John Holksall was there, wasn't he, as well? So, and so between the three of you, probably,
things went worse. Stuart, it was just at the
John was
beginning.
a great salesman. John had his following.
Well, it was just at the beginning of the digital boom.
Yeah.
So you had so Stuart ran the side of the business that all the sort of the digital studio recording equipment kind of came into, and again,
who's the other guy?
Andy Mack. Do you remember him?
Yeah, Andy, and another guy who ran our MEC division for a while.
Oh, Kevin Pawsey.
Kevin Pawsey, yeah. So they were some
really good guys.
Some amazing guys that we found, and they just joined us for a while.
Look, do you know what? We'll never ever mention all the amazing people that have worked
exactly.
here, but as you say, Stuart
and
is...
Saturday, like part-time staff. We used to get some great part-time staff, and I'd love to know where they are today. There was one guy I remember, Barry Sear. So if Barry's looking, send us an email, tell us what you're doing, because he became a barrister, I think.
Did he?
Yeah. Oh, he joined the Royal Navy and he was a barrister. Anyway.
Things, despite this double-dip recession, sales were great
Sales
for us.
really went, and we were doubling the turnover each year.
Pretty much.
And I was running it on a shoestring, back office shoestring, and so that was ragging us out. And then... we gradually... I was always reluctant to add more staff, you see. That was the trouble because,
I literally remember then, I mean, and it's bizarre now, that the amount of money nowadays that Andertons and I am able to authorise to just throw willy-nilly at ideas, to just, particularly on the digital side of things, where you little bits of software do funny something. Anyway, you throw... 10,000, 20,000, 50,000 at something just to sort of, I wonder if that'll work like that. And I just remember, again, back in those days, you couldn't even get like £5 without having to go through the ringer with you about, the justification. But I guess because that's how strapped it was. It was just stretched. And all the fittings, as you say, carried on being homemade. And...
Well, it wasn't. Yeah, we had some nice shop fit though back then.
Yeah, but you still did it all yourself, didn't you?
Well, pretty
there
much.
Wasn't really any off-the-shelf stuff, was there?
No, that's true. No, that's right.
You designed all the guitar hangers.
I designed all the guitar racks. That's it. Yeah, and made those and things like that. But so that was the fun part for me. I used to like that bit as well. But anyway.
so relatively quickly, it became apparent that it had been the right move. And I said it wasn't just the scaling up of the size; it was very much the presentation became much more in keeping with. Yeah. How you would expect other retailers to be. I think both of us
realised that, during those days, the clothing shops and everything else, there was a different ethos about, the old beer and fags type rock and roll music shop was really, outdated. Mm-hmm. It was an outdated retail
Very intimidating.
Environment. Yeah, it was intimidating for some people, but then, like the guys that didn't spend a lot of money liked it, because they could come in and practice for 2 or 3 hours, their latest lick and then go, thanks, Harry, thanks, Pete, and bugger off, So I wanted this clean, clean stock as well, like all,
I'm laughing really, because I remember the musician's notice board. Yeah. Every music store used to have a musician's notice board, and it would just be this bit of cork board somewhere in the store covered in odd bits of drummer wanted, guitar player wanted, like that. And you insisted that we have our own Andertons postcards, and you were only allowed to stick a note on the notice board if you wrote it within an Andertons postcard, and it had to be very much so it looked super, super neat and custom on it. It was such a pain in the arse to manage.
That was my OCD.
It was. Yeah. We had like literally every day, or like every few days, Stuart or I would be just like, somebody tidy up the notice board, please, because if Dad sees that, he's nut, because there's like wonky postcards or someone's managed to stick. The day that we went digital and I could finally go, we don't need a musician's notice board anymore because now the internet exists and people can just find other... It was like, yay! We just get rid of this thing. It's been the bane of my life for 10 years.
Do you remember the notice that Harry put up there once? So, it's always...
Russell Morgan used to put some good ones up there as a wind-up.
My dad put one up once, didn't he? Which was drummer wanted, big letters, drummer wanted, no kit, no experience, no transport, but dead keen.
Yeah.
all these spoof things, were on the thing. So.
So let's go to another momentous decision that you made in 1995.
Yes.
When
the first 5 years were phenomenal, in terms of getting, the growth and the cash flow and everything else, and we were able to get on our feet. So and then we did start employing more people. Didn't we? So
we were we must have had. We were certainly into double figures by then, weren't we, in terms of staff, and we had a drum manager and Stuart was the high-tech manager and me as the guitar manager. And so there must have been, 10 staff, probably
and
10.
What did you notice about the trends in the music business? Because during that time, it was still very much people, when I ever used to go to try and get finance for the business, people just, the music business as such,
it was when...
never had... still didn't have a serious
that was the turn. 1990 for me was the turning point where the music retail became something that professional and semi-professional musicians needed a place to go and buy their stuff from, to it began to become a lifestyle hobby choice. So people would just go, I fancy playing the guitar at the weekend, or I fancy playing drums, And I think also that baby boomer generation, so all those guys of your age who'd had a bit of a dabble in a Beatles beatnik kind of band in the 60s, were all coming out of the other side of having kids and a bit more disposable income, and they were all going, what do I fancy doing now with my spare time and cash?
Grow my hair. I can't anymore because I'm bored.
And they'd be just like, I'm going to go and buy that guitar that I couldn't afford when I was 16. So... And that was a different customer, that was a customer that wanted a high service level experience.
Well, we had lots of professionals, accountants, bank managers and company directors.
So it was, the timing was very fortuitous in terms of,
and many more ladies, many more girls coming.
Yeah, that's still a massive disparity nowadays,
but more, like noticeably more girls coming.
I think we very much understood that the old music store and many other of our competitors' music stores were unbelievably intimidating places to go for anyone that didn't really know what they were going in for. And if you were a woman at the time wanting to, even more so again, just another level of intimidation. And I think we worked really, really hard to make sure that we tried to remove that sense of intimidation wherever we possibly could. It was always really, really difficult to get it perfectly right, because the business was then, and even still now, is largely male dominated in terms of its workforce. But I think we made massive strides into just making it a more inviting place, relaxed place to be.
No, we did have. There was one period where I really started to worry, I can't remember when it was, but we were really running into financial difficulties, because I'd taken the foot off the brakes, as it were, and we were running into financial difficulties, and we had to make one or two people redundant as well, through that period.
That was late 90s again, I think. You wound that on.
Late 90s, but that
another recession time, I think, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was another
perhaps
recession.
grown a bit too fast.
Yeah, and I can't remember whether and in 1995. Yes, it must have been after 1995, probably when my focus again was more on the ACM thing.
Well, I think this is, because I do remember again, early, even back then, Andertons would still sell hundreds of beginner guitar and drum sets and things at Christmas time. In fact, if anything, back then the Christmas peak felt more important than it is nowadays. Yeah. But huge numbers, and by the following March, you just knew that 90% of those people had packed it in. They just, and I think even then, you and I were talking about the problem that young kids, kids in their teenage would get a guitar for Christmas. They'd be listening to Oasis or whatever Nirvana or whatever the cool thing was at the time, and then they'd go, "Can you get me some lessons, please, Mum and Dad?" And some 60-year-old guy would, with a sort of like a Bobby Charlton comb-over hairdo would get green sleeves out of his, classical book, and that's what they would teach them. And you'd just go, is it really any wonder then that, 95% of kids just go, oh, I don't really fancy doing this, And but I remember both of us have, I think I'm pretty sure I remember almost the exact words were, if we could introduce some new way, a more engaging way of learning, even if it just broke even, but it kept a few, it reduced that attrition rate of people giving up, it would be worth doing. Yeah.
When did you start the Weekend Warriors program? Was that around that time?
That was later.
It was later. That span off from the ACM.
You then sort of took that on as a sort of a...
Well, there was a cataclysmic moment. I was at a music conference down in Bournemouth, like an annual music conference, and I was chatting away with somebody who was a flute teacher,
right.
So it was all classical. And she said, well, what do you do? I said, I've got a rock and roll music shop. Yeah, rock and roll, that's not proper music, is it? That is it. I remember her words this day. Oh, that's not proper music, is it? And I came back from there, and one of the guys who was one of the lecturers there, and I won't remember his name, but he was the director of music at Wells Cathedral School.
Right.
But he was very progressive. He saw the benefit of modern music and how the UK PLC, the amount of money that was generated for the UK economy in the rock and roll business and copyright and music and everything else, Yet back then there was no government funding for it. It all went to the classical conservatoires, like the London School of Music and stuff. So it was music in education. There was no money for kids. There was no money in schools and that's for kids to get an education. And it also, the only qualification that they could get back in those days was the Associated
Associated
Board of the Schools of Music or something.
Yes.
Right.
ABRSM, something like that.
So up to grade 8.
Yeah.
And the syllabus was green sleeves, on classical guitar and all. So there wasn't a qualification. There wasn't anything at all apart from, I think, where the Brit School had started.
Rock School had just started, I think, and that was I can't remember what the nationality of the guy is that started that, but there was a sense that you began to see this graded system that fitted in with sort of our education requirements, if you like, a sense of grading, but more contemporary.
Yeah, I was really keen. I thought, wow, this is great. But I mean, again, another cataclysmic moment I met Phil Brooks, who was a local guitar teacher. And we hit it off, and we had the same sort of vision, but he was really, he had this vision for a way to teach kids, anybody who wanted to learn, rather than a one-to-one, I think up until that time, most of the music education was one-to-one. You went to your drum teacher, you went to your guitar teacher, and it wasn't economic, wasn't efficient. And so we tried going out. We had a little program, didn't we, where we were trying to go out into schools with a little rock workshop and everything else, and that didn't work. And it was Phil really said, we've got to have, we need some premises, and I said, well, I've got some premises, we've got Hayden Place, which is still empty.
Yeah, the old store.
So it's been on the market for 5 years because the property had, bottomed out completely. So I'm putting two and two together. I think, well, okay, hang on, what's that costing me a year? Could we get going there? So that's how the Academy of Contemporary Music started, really. So Phil and I went into partnership, and bless him, he came up with the same amount of money as me, and we put this into a pot, and we started off, where it was enough to kickstart the ACM. But all my focus then, of course, was 100% on the Academy of Contemporary Music, and that just went like a rocket,
And as I said, because I in my head I remember that this original line of going, even if it just breaks even but sells a few guitars, it's worth doing. To fast forward, not that much, 5 or 6 years maybe later, 4 years, and it was like, hang on a second, it's making more money than Andertons. Yeah. And you just go, who saw that coming? And of course, ACM has been replicated around the world
Yeah.
many times because people have realised now that that type of music tuition has massive demand and can be very
Well, it was exciting. It was really
commercially
exciting,
viable.
yeah. And I mean, the premises when I got offered the opportunity. Well, so we had the school going in the old premises. Then we were. I mean, again, this is why it was so stressful for me. Phil would go. We had to say to the education authorities, we had to commit to so many pupils, nearly 18 months to 2 years ahead, right? So that you for funding.
Yeah.
Because they all got funding. Because we were working under Guildford College at those times. We were called what was known as an outside collaborative provider. And Phil would come along and say, Pete, said I've committed us to another 180 pupils for year after next. Don't know where we're going to put them. Thanks.
For that, to put things in perspective, though, you are talking about year one, 30 full-time students, wasn't it? For just doing guitar. That basically Phil taught, didn't he?
Yeah. Phil and then
Bruce Dickinson.
Bruce Dickinson joined us.
To within 6 or 7 years, over 1,000 full-time students, 1,000 full-time students going through, and think about the scale of an operation that has to teach that many people, employ that many staff, and all of the legislation around running a college.
Yeah, it was exciting. I loved it, because it was, for me, it was the way of like, here's a challenge, got to find some more property, got to negotiate this, and it was always, like get in there and wow.
Yeah.
So I was lucky. Phil ran all the front end, and I was running the back office stuff. Again, really hands on with a good accountant and stuff like that. And that went enormously successful within 4 years. And I think, and then we were also getting all the courses. What's it called? Like qualified. They were all certified as with exams and everything else. We could say to people, yes, to mums and dads, if your Johnny, studies with us, they can come out with a piece of paper, that's really is a recognised degree. Well, we actually did go up to university degree. We fast-tracked 2-year degree, but we were running a drum school, guitar school, bass school, music production, and then that's when we got the spin-off with music education consultants going into schools.
That's true.
So we set up a division going into schools and colleges to help them teach music in education. So trying to do that, but that was hard work, and so I invested a lot of energy into that for a while, but that never really took off, because the only good thing we did was Eton College. That was a great contract.
For a few years but I think
it
was interesting. There was a relatively short window where the established old guard of music teacher didn't know what to do to deliver contemporary music tuition. And so we created a division that would go in and consult and help them. But what we didn't realise that was within 4 or 5 years, new teachers were coming in who did know what to do. They just didn't need us anymore.
Sure.
And so I think it relatively quickly became just redundant, that consultancy business. But it was good while it lasted. Yeah. And I think from my point of view, one of the things that helped manage our relationship and gave me perhaps the freedom that because you and I we both have a very different approach, or certainly probably maybe it's more similar now, but back then it was a really different approach to how we wanted to do things. A shared vision of what we wanted to achieve, but a very different approach to doing it. And I think the fact that you were able, or the fact that you were sort of drawn away from the music retail side of it to go and focus on ACM, and that was commercially successful as well, just meant that I didn't have the sense of you looking over my shoulder all the time going, I wouldn't do it like that, and I wouldn't do it like that, and I wouldn't do it like that. Not because it was wrong, just because, and I don't know how I would have reacted. I think, I probably would have reacted much like you did with your dad, going, like, don't do it like that, and don't do that, don't. You kick back, wouldn't you? So I think it was a quite a happy time.
Well, I mean, we used to talk about, this might sound a bit patronising, but I was grooming you to take over. You know, I wanted you to have the business skills as well, which is like around the time when you went to Cranfield.
Yeah.
Went off to Cranfield School of Management or something like that, you know, just to sort of like sharpen, you know, make you, so that if the opportunity came to scale the business up, you know, you weren't frightened about it. You know, you could do it. And I was probably still a bit too cautious back then, having been through, you know, my history of ups and downs and that sort of thing. But so anyway, so here we go. So you're running the music business. It's great, and it's really going well. And I was able to sort of hands off that, concentrating on the ACM, and ACM took off as well. And then we get to the year 2000, when I had a serious medical fell over medically, and had to take. I had to just go into hospital and have an operation, and then I wrote you and Phil a letter, didn't I, saying, here you go guys, now you've got to step up to the plate, because I am, you know, I'm out of the picture. Yeah. So, and that was life-changing for me and you, and probably Phil as well, because, you know, Phil had to sort of run the whole of the thing, but again, lucky enough, we put some good back infrastructure. We had some good infrastructure in place, so I still could see the management accounts coming in, and I sort of, you know, so I had a little handle on it, but I wasn't involved in the day-to-day business. And you ran the thing. So from that point onwards, I was able to step back from the business, wasn't I? Sort of, and let you guys get on with it for a number of years. Then Phil and I sort of, as we got into the, you know, a bit later, Phil and I began to have differences of opinion, the way we wanted the business to go, you know, and I'd always come from a business background, I suppose, where profit for me was the fuel for any enterprise. You know, you can't run an enterprise unless it's making a profit, because it's only the profit that is the fuel for it. But academics have a different approach, you know, academically, because there's normally unlimited funding.
I think there's a big age gap between you and Phil, and I know when Phil talked to me, I think he felt like there was part of it he felt like perhaps the first 5 or 10 years of ACM he'd very much deferred to all your decisions just because of your seniority and age. I think he just wanted to do his own thing, didn't he?
It's a bit of an Oedipus Oedipus syndrome.
Oh, crikey, I don't know about that.
Well, you've got to kill your father in order to.
Yes. But he.
But so we went our own ways, and I said, well, okay, buy me out. Yeah. So I was happy at that stage to relinquish. I was chairman of ACM, but I didn't have much to do with the day-to-day running of it, and I wanted, you know. So anyway, so I sold out, and came away with a little bit of pot, and I was able to then reinvest that back into the store. Which meant we were completely free of any financing by banks and all that sort of stuff, which allowed you to really, gave you a free hand to do pretty much what you wanted. And there we go. That's the start of. I mean, and it's just been amazing. What you've. And you came in at the right time. I wasn't part of that computer. What should I say? The internet. Okay, it was sort of like, it was a bit too late for me. I was a bit too old, and so on and so forth. But so to see the opportunities there,
Yeah, and that's the bit I think I'll forever be grateful for. Despite all the success we've had over the last 15 years or so, I never and have never really had to experience that sort of gut-wrenching feling of, I've never had to put my own house up as equity in the business.
Is the money going to stop tomorrow?
Yeah, well, I think to a certain extent, that's in retail. You never really know what the following day is going to be. So there is always a sense. I think I've got, that's a part of the drive, I think. And I, sometimes now I even call it, feeding the beast. You're also going, it doesn't matter what you did today, you got to do it again tomorrow. And I do want to say very, very quickly, a 3 or 4 month exceptional trading period, you very, very quickly realise that you've geared up the operation to just becomes the normal now. Like, we just got to do that the next 3 months, and then of course a bit more. So I can only say thank you, for going through the difficult first bit.
I know this is a bit like this. What do they call this? Mutual admiration society. But my old ethos, if you like, for how to treat a customer and how to present, a store and being in retail and all that sort of stuff. You picked up on that, which is great, and gave me the confidence to let you go. And so I was able to step back from the business. I was able to really step back and let you have your own head and take it where you wanted to. And it was difficult for me, because that was the hardest thing for me to do, was to let go.
Yeah.
So I let go of the ACM completely, and then to say, right, I've got to let go of this. So that was main reason for, when did we move down? Didn't move out the area for a while, did we?
Well, the letting go thing. I remember,
and not being, not having to interfere.
I almost felt it was almost a sad. It was sad in a way, really, because I think the only way that you really, the only way that you were able to let go was to go full cold turkey.
Yeah.
And go, I'm not even coming in anymore.
No, I couldn't.
And we wouldn't. I don't think. Well, okay. So we're. When was the last time that you even set foot in the store? I mean, in the last 10 years, you've been in what? Twice, maybe?
Probably, yeah. Well, the problem was, if I came in, I'd see the weed. If there were weeds growing out the front, like on the front of the pavement, or there was,
I knew you'd spot those.
or there was dust on a guitar or something like that.
I know.
Yeah,
and you're back in it straight away.
Yeah, I was back in it straight away, going, yeah, come on, guys,
But this was, I think, this was fundamentally our biggest, You are a perfectionist, and everything you've done in your life has been done to such a high level. And the fact that you beat yourself up about not being good enough as a drummer, and actually it was, in your mind, it was better to give up if you couldn't be that. It's like, and that was, I think, the bit where I was just like, I don't know if I can work with you because I don't want to sweat the small stuff. I want to go. There's a sort of I always sort of think, if the shared vision is here, I want to get there as fast as possible, and I'll get there and realise that there's a load of stuff that's messed up and needs to be fixed when we get there. Whereas you'll go, I want to get there too, but I'm just going to make sure that nothing is messed up while we go. I'm going to think and plan and everything like that. So you still ultimately get to the same place.
But coming back to the customer, I think what you've managed to achieve is we're still, I like to think we are, which just gives me great pleasure, we're still customer focused.
We are.
So whatever that means, and I think, I used to think, what am I doing here in this business? No, I know what we're doing. We're providing the best service that we can for musicians. In all shapes and forms. People that want to make music, how can we help you?
Yeah.
So it always comes back to that, really, isn't it?
I think it comes back to the love of it.
Yeah.
I think, honestly and truthfully, I love being surrounded by musical instruments. I love the opportunity to play the guitar. I love seeing what happens when people get together and make music. I see it at every level, from how therapeutic it is, how much enjoyment it is, how the social interaction's great, how fulfilling it can be to write a nice piece of music, all that kind of stuff. And everything, I think, driven by just going, let's try to get as many people to have that experience and engage with us. So all the thing about the high levels of customer service, it's not really done from a point of view of going...
No, but that was also what ACM was about, like being able to sort of provide the tuition to encourage people to come in. We used to run, like Saturday workshops for kids and things, and then the Weekend Warrior program, all that sort of stuff. It's also about how to. I don't think I come from. I don't feel like it's because there's a textbook that says if you want to be a successful retailer, this is what you must do. No. I just think it's a passion.
It's a passion, and if you can deliver that, the chances are more people will come and experience the music.
But we were talking last night, weren't we? So when we got back from Halloween and seeing off the second bottle of red wine, which I wish we hadn't have done. Yeah, that was good. Because that was a mistake. But we were talking there, and we were talking about enthusiasm, and passion. And it was one of the things that you reminded me of my time, playing professionally in a band, on stage, thousands of screaming girls and that sort of thing, and looking around at the other guys in the band, and experiencing that amazing buzz when the band comes together. It's rocking. Everyone's in the pocket, and it's just a sort of like, it's a spiritual experience.
Yeah,
it's almost like an spiritual experience. You think, wow, this is.
And I was saying, how has mankind evolved? Womankind, mankind, whatever evolved. It is a pseudo-religious experience when music and shared music good music comes together. And if you're part of a group of people that's making that music, it's up there with the greatest feeling. Yeah, well,
your speech in when you got that award in America was, I thought, was on the button, because that I suppose if you think back, it is enthusiasm for for music and the passion for it. That's and the business is almost second, but if it's successful, it fuels. It fuels,
and that's where
the thing being able to encompass a bigger,
because that's your
area.
Absolutely what has had a lasting rubbed off effect on me, and took me a few years to process in my head and understand. It's fundamentally, all the enthusiasm in the world is wonderful, but it doesn't pay the bills. No. And particularly you got 100 and something staff now, and commitments to spend hundreds of thousands of pounds a month on X, Y, and Z. Yeah. It's like,
well, like Gulp, when you come to me and go, I think we need to redo our software. Our what is it?
Yeah, well, we spent £1 million on our website in 2017.
Yeah,
or something like that.
Gulp.
But and that's the reality, isn't it? Is that the business has to be profitable in order to deliver on all those commitments.
But trust, huge trust in you guys, that's wonderful for me, because it means I can step right back in the business and I can just, enjoy life.
And there's something as well about the legacy you've created has meant that, staff, from Stuart and Beverly, my two partners, through to lots of guys, from Gavin, who does our guitar repairs, who's been with us for 30 odd years, and the guys that manage our site, and we've got some amazing staff that share that vision and have stayed and all part of it. I've got before we come to the end here, I've got a photograph for you. Tell me, and this photo will be on screen now. Tell me as much as you can about where that was. And what's going on in this photograph? Who is that handsome devil?
Oh God, that's me. What
year is that?
60. Let me have it. It's got to be pre-68, because this is in 18 to 20 Stoke Fields.
Yeah, so that's the old store.
So it's in the old store. So this has got to be 1965, 66, 67, somewhere around that. Yeah, and. I think we're just trying to get some shots. Look at this, Boozy and Hawks, all this stuff. The air conditioning in the back right-hand corner there.
What's the guitar?
That's a Harmony Sovereign.
Sovereign, sure.
I think so. Yeah, Harmony Sovereign Rocket.
No. It's a Harmony H75.
Harmony H75. Yeah. Okay.
And.
You haven't got it for me, have you? You're not going to present it to me.
I might do. I might have managed to find somewhere from 1964. It's a little early birthday present. Thank you very much for coming in and doing the... I don't know what you're going to do with this.
God, and a suit and tie. Look at this. And I've even got a pocket handkerchief. Can you imagine? I still wonder what the... Maybe this was because we still had to deal with a sort of quite a mixed clientele in those days. So, apart from the rock and rollers, still had to deal with the mums and dads and all that sort of thing.
Do you want to... That is a 1964...
Harmony H75.
Harmony H75.
Oh, wow.
It may... whether it's the actual one in that photograph
Does this mean I've got to now start learning to play the guitar all over again? I can play an E chord.
I don't know. I just thought, it's your birthday coming up soon, and we've got to that point in our lives where we don't really buy each other birthday presents because you just end up going, I don't know what to buy anymore. And I thought to myself, you're coming on to do a video.
That's brilliant.
I love that photograph. We've got copies of this photograph up in the store, and it kind of reminds me, like you say, I think this is maybe 65, something like that.
Yeah, it's got to be around that. So I don't know what that. What else does it show? There's all sorts of all our catalogues back there.
But I just thought, what can I buy you? And I started searching. It's taken me quite a while to find this guitar, particularly to find one that hasn't been modified or anything like that. And so there you are. Happy birthday. Thank you very much for coming on.
Indeed. Can I give you, I won't give you a big kiss on camera because he always uses his tongue. That's the truth.
And yes, and well done, I suppose, on behalf of everyone who works at Andertons now and has done, and all the customers that shop with us. Thank you very much for starting that one back then. It was a good decision.
Yeah, but you sort of like, you say, isn't it amazing that how this, the business like it is now, started from that funny little greengrocer's shop back in 1964 or something like that.
Yeah, different.
So, it is amazing.
Yeah, pretty cool, man. But thank you very much. So there we are.
Oh, thank you.
Well done if you've sat through all that.
Part 3 next week.
That's the end. That's the end. Yes, thank you very much. Thanks, guys, for watching. I hope you found that little trip down memory lane interesting.
Yeah. Okay.
But thank you very much, for coming on.
And you.
All right.
I'll be shaking.
Cheers, Dad.